evening, everyone. Is there someone here from the Ministerial Alliance? I think I saw Pastor Fasten. Yes.
May we have a moment of silence, please. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of God rule in your hearts, which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful." God, we thank you for this gathering tonight. We thank you for the men and women of the city council and their leadership, oh God. We pray a special blessing over them tonight, oh God. For all those that have gathered here, oh God, we're just praying, oh God, that we continue to move forward, oh God, and let the peace of you rule in our hearts tonight, oh God, that you get all the glory, we give you all the honor, we give you all the praise, and we say amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I'd like to officially open the meeting with a pledge. Stan, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a large group tonight. I suspect that this is the first time some or maybe even many of you are attending a city council meeting. So I want to say welcome, first of all, and by being involved, this is one of the greatest things in our form of government where people could come and voice their opinions to their local government. So welcome. First item on the agenda is a mayoral appointment. I would like a motion to approve the appointment of Kevin Grevin.
Josh
I'll
make
make
the
a
motion.
motion.
To the vacant
I'll
ward.
second
I'm going to finish it.
it. Come on here.
He's
For a group that
excited.
didn't want it, you shortchanged in 2 weeks. To the vacant Ward 5 council position for the unfulfilled term ending April 2024.
I'll make a motion to appoint Kevin to Ward 5.
Motion made. Is there a second?
I'll-
second.
Good.
Motion made and second. Any further questions or discussions? If
Yeah, I
not,
just want to make a comment real quick. I wanted to say, just not congratulations, but just some props for Councilwoman Megan for bringing this up. And also, I thought that Councilman Jared Hall had a very, very great point for waiting for this nomination to be made. And I appreciate you guys standing up and doing that. And I think it was
Thank
the
you.
proper thing to do.
Thank you, Rob.
any other comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Lori, would you do the swearing in? Kevin, if you would come forward.
Kevin, do you want us to get pictures for you for Tanya?
whatever you tell me you want to do.
Good answer.
That's what I'd say if I was home, so
That's
whatever you
what
tell me you want to do.
Gotcha.
Nice.
Well, I think we need to turn this way so they can take your picture. You want us to move a little bit more? Yeah, sorry. We're sure now. Yeah. I state your name.
I, Stephen Grieven,
home.
Kevin, welcome. And thank you for giving your time and talents to the betterment of Rolla. We look forward to having you. Next item is a public hearing. We have one item, which is a public hearing and ordinance to rezone 71 Rose Court. Tom?
Okay. This is the property is a corner of Rose Court and Highway 72. There's a single-family house on the property. You may remember driving past there. It had a kind of a bad-shaped garage on the back of it. That garage has been demolished. The applicant is seeking to basically do an addition onto the house in where that garage used to be, with a garage on the ground floor and a dwelling unit above. So when they do that, then that will essentially create a duplex on the property, and so they're requesting to rezone the property from the R1 single-family district to the R2 two-family district. The majority of the area is zoned R1. However, the property just to the east is zoned R2, and it does have a duplex on the property. And then the property to the, I might have said east, I meant west.
Okay.
Then the property to the east is zoned CO, commercial office. However, that is being used as a single-family house still. I don't think it was ever converted into an office. This is an air photo kind of showing the property. This is, of course, before they started remodeling the property. If you drive out there now, it's looking pretty good because they've started working on it. And as I said, where that garage, you can see on the back side of it, that's where they would they're planning on doing this addition. Just to summarize, the comprehensive plan designates the area as being appropriate for low-density residential uses. Now, although low density, they give a range, and that range would include the R2 zoning district, so it kind of allows for R1 or R2 in where it says low density. It is adjacent to property that's zoned R2, and also adjacent to a property that's zoned CO, commercial office. The zoning code that we're going to talk about a little bit later on tonight, one of the things that's proposed in it is to reduce the minimum lot size of the R2 district from 9,000 feet to square feet to, I believe, 5,000 square feet. This property is currently just a little bit under that 9,000 square feet, so if what the applicant is planning on doing is waiting for this, if this new zoning code passes in time for their project, then they'll be able to move forward with the project. They still need the zoning, like, regardless, but if otherwise, they would need to seek for a variance in order to actually get the permits to do this addition to convert it into a duplex. The Planning and Zoning Commission took a look at this, and they did recommend approval, a vote of 5-0. Do you have any questions for me before you open the public hearing?
Any questions for Tom? If not, I would like to officially open the public hearing. Is there anyone that owns property within 185 feet of this proposed rezoning that would like to speak for the proposed rezoning? Is there anyone that owns property within 185 feet of this proposed zoning that would like to speak against the proposed rezoning? Is there anyone that owns property outside of the 185 feet of this proposed rezoning that would like to speak for it? And finally, is there anyone that owns property outside of the 185 feet that would like to speak against the proposed rezoning? If not, we'll close the public hearing. Council, questions and comments?
I guess I'm gonna kick right off here. So, real quick, looking at the property across the street that's already zoned R2, I can see there's an entryway off of 72. What I'm worried about is parking. Is there enough parking for multifamily there on a roundabout like that for that? And I'm sure the Planning and Zoning Commission has already looked at this, but I'm just wanting to hear.
Tom?
Yes, regardless of what you do tonight, there's parking requirements in our code, so when they issue a building permit, they are required to have off-street parking.
And We feel like there is parking there.
Yeah, the applicant has already prepared a site plan, and they know what they're planning on doing, and they'll be able to fit. Plus, this unit is going over a garage in addition, so there's 2 parking spaces in that garage.
Any other council comments, questions?
Did also probably should have said the applicant is requesting the first and final reading tonight because the first meeting in July is canceled. So, just want to make sure you were aware of that.
Tom, I guess I'm not sure the reason for the request. If this has to be, it has to be rezoned, but then the applicant has to go to Board of Adjustment. Or, I believe, we enact the new changes to Chapter 42. Are those the 2 options?
Yes.
Okay, so what is a final reading tonight really going to do?
I don't think it really actually gets them any closer to the goal any faster than they would get otherwise. But the applicant did request it, and he is here tonight if you'd like to question them.
Okay. If the applicant wants to answer that?
I've been waiting on the rezoning thing for quite some while. I've been talking to Mr. Kuntz because I own several other properties in Rolla. A lot of them that we've taken on that was trouble properties like this in town, and we've rehabbed them. So if the zoning thing continues to go on, then I would do the next steps to get the variances or extra things. To answer his question, there is an access to that property on the backside to 72. And the idea with it is to alleviate on-road parking that is already clustered up in that roundabout.
That's where I was going. That's where I was going with that. I
Yeah.
couldn't see it off of
Yeah.
this picture.
Yeah, so the idea would be to make it 2-car, and the only reason why we would like to make it a dual dwelling is because of fixing it up the way that we have. There's not profit in it to just have one and having a small house, but having 2, then there would be profit in it to redevelop it.
I understand that. I think it's a great thing to redevelop the property. I guess what I'm still wondering is, let's hypothetically say council grants this second reading tonight. What does that really do for you? Because you still have to either wait for Chapter 42 changes, or you have to go through Board of Adjustment.
It'd just be one less thing to have to wait for, because then when they do change it on the other, then we're ready to, start moving forward with it.
Okay. I've seen a lot of people come like you, and I think I'll just offer this constructive advice. If you take this as a notion to proceed, you're vulnerable.
Yeah. We went ahead and pulled a building permit to make it a 2-bedroom place so that it could start generating some money. We finished off the backside that we're actually gonna take back off. And so we're just doing everything we can to move it along so that when things do open up, we can start on it immediately. That's
Okay.
the only reason.
As long as you're clear with the process, I'm good.
Yeah, and I talked to Mr. Kuntz. He keeps me pretty tied in.
Okay. Any other questions by council? If not, first reading, please.
An ordinance to approve the rezoning of property addressed as 71 Rose Court from the R1 Single Family District to the R2 Two Family District.
There's a request to council to have a second reading. What is council's pleasure?
I would like to move to do the second reading today.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
I think there was 2 noes. Let the record show there was 2 noes. Final reading, please.
An ordinance to approve the rezoning of property addressed as 71 Rose Court from the R1 Single Family District to the R2 Two Family District.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion by Megan, second by Josh. Any further discussion?
Terry.
Oh, Terry, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Terry. I'll make a motion.
Any further discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Higgins,
Yes.
Grevin,
Yes.
Steen,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
Sherman,
Yes.
Balch,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kessinger,
Yes.
Florence,
Yay.
Hall,
Yes.
Fredley,
Yes.
12 ayes.
Rezoning is granted. Next item is, there's no acknowledgements or special presentations tonight. We also do not have any old business. Moving on to new business, we have 3 items. First is an ordinance to amend Section 41-2 regarding concealed weapons. Chief?
Good evening.
Good evening.
As we talked about the other day, I'm requesting that we change the ordinance so it mirrors state law in that anyone 19 years of age or older, 18 if they're in the military or honorably discharged from the military, will be allowed to carry a concealed weapon in the city of Rolla. This also includes carrying it concealed inside of their vehicle, or I believe it also goes for open carry, which is within the same law in the state of Missouri. Any
Questions
questions?
for Chief?
So all we're doing is mirroring the state statute,
Exactly.
correct?
Correct.
Which is what we should do anyway.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Not, this is a first, yeah, this is a first reading.
Okay.
An ordinance repealing Section 41-2 of the General Ordinances of the City of Rolla, Missouri, known as the Code of the City of Rolla, Missouri, and enacting new Sections 41-2 in lieu thereof pertaining to carrying concealed weapons.
Next item is just a discussion. No action is being requested about conducting a neighborhood plan to be known as the Old Town Neighborhood Plan. Tom?
Thank you. So, you may remember a few years ago that we did a neighborhood plan for the Schumann-Berwan neighborhood, and I think that went relatively good. We started work on another neighborhood plan for calling it the Old Town neighborhood. This is the area kind of south of 5th and 6th Street, so it's kind of south of the downtown, down to Highway 72, and then almost over to Highway 63, Bishop, and then basically over to Walnut Over. It takes in an area that kind of goes over to Salem. So I got the map on the screen, perhaps, for you to see. So just kind of wanted to let you know that we'd started working on this. Actually held a neighborhood meeting last week. Didn't have quite the number of people there as I was hoping to get there, but we sent out letters to every property owner and resident in the area, trying to drive them to a online survey, and so I'm hopeful that we'll get enough response from that to get some additional input. But basically, you know, with the neighborhood plan, to kind of take in the input and try to, went out and walked every street in the neighborhood already, and I'm going to try to boil all that information together into kind of a plan of action for the neighborhood. You know, at the end there'll be some goals and action steps to make some sort of improvements. Just, right now I don't know exactly what that will be, but that's the hope is. I'm going to be working on this over the summer. Got an intern who will be with us, a planning intern. He's actually a student in Kansas City, but he actually grew up here in Rolla, and so he's in Rolla for the summer. And he's going to be helping out, and so we're working on that over the summer. And looks like the late summer, early fall, I should have a draft to be able to present to the neighborhood, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then to you all.
Tom, a couple of years ago, you embarked on a similar program for the Schumann edition, and I certainly think one of the highlights of that was a tremendous outreach to all of the residents over there. That may be the first time we did something so comprehensive. But there was a list of recommendations, a couple of pages, a list of things that we were going to do. Looking back on where we are with that, what did we accomplish, what didn't we accomplish, and maybe what lessons learned are there for all of us as to apply to this next phase?
I mean, I would say, I guess one thing I've noticed is it's probably going slower than I would hope as far as knocking off the action item steps. One of the big things is trying to just get some kind of neighborhood organization or neighborhood watch or something like that to sort of get more people a little bit more involved in the neighborhood themselves. And that still hasn't happened. I'm a little disappointed in that, but that's one of my goals for the summer. And so been sort of slowly chipping away each year, try to say, here's what we're going to try to do this year, and try to work on it each year. That's kind of how it works, is just chip away and eventually might make some progress as far as those action items go. But I will say, as far as success in that area, I can't say how much is tied to this neighborhood planning effort and how much is tied to general economic conditions or just timing. But there has been I believe, a tremendous improvement in that neighborhood. If you drive through now, many houses are being demolished or rehabilitated and improved, and I think people in general are taking a little bit better care. We went through and did a kind of a sweep for property maintenance issues and sent out many friendly letters at first saying, hey, we've noticed this, going to give you some time to correct it, and then if we needed to, went on to some next steps. But things are getting better in that area. So I guess that's the kind of the lesson, just be patient. And this neighborhood, I've already found out, is very different from that neighborhood. That's one thing. There aren't many problems with this neighborhood, so the neighborhood plan, I think, is going to be a little bit thinner than the other one as far as action items. People really do like living in this. Well, they like living in the Schumann-Berwan area also, but people also really like living in this area. So, anyway.
I don't know if everyone realizes it, but part of the impetus to redo Chapter 42 lies with the work was done on the Schumann, and I think there's elements in the Chapter 42 revision that are certainly an outgrowth of what is trying to be delivered in that particular neighborhood.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'd like you to ask you to do this week is if you can send around that Schumann neighborhood, that set of recommendations and outcomes to, I would say most of the council probably wasn't here when that document was originally generated. So I think it would be helpful for them to see what it is that we were trying to accomplish in that neighborhood.
Tom, do you mind just giving us a little bit of highlights of what the negative and positive was from the town hall?
Well, the big negative is I don't think as many people showed up as I would like to have shown up. So sometimes when that happens, you got to take what you do here with a grain of salt, because it may not be representative of the area as a whole. But in general, I mean, the discussions were very constructive and positive. So basically what we did is I just kind of introduced, what this is, where this is, and kind of the timeline and that kind of things. And similar to how I handled the Schumann-Berwan neighborhood meeting, had people divide up into groups and gave them particular subjects to discuss amongst themselves, and then had them kind of present what they came up with. That way everybody could hear. So we don't have time for everybody to discuss every single issue, but it was kind of time saver to do it that way. And then, but they present and just allow them to, if there's something they feel strongly about, add to or in opposition to whatever the group came up with, and gave people opportunity to speak about that. But in the end, the discussion was very positive, and that's kind of where I found that there aren't as many issues in this neighborhood. I was kind of hoping, I was having trouble coming up with potential things myself, and then didn't get very many additional things from them. So it's a good place to live. I think one of the negative things was some concerns about traffic in some locations and how that works.
Tom, when you walk over in the Schumann area over there has been a resurgence and a reinvestment in that part of the community. As someone who walks that area, it's nice to see that. It's nice to see our community reinvesting in some of those houses that are affordable for families. I'm hoping that this center portion of town does the same thing, that we step up and try to keep our community what it should be.
And I think this area has a lot of potential also. It's near the downtown. It's very walkable. It's pleasant to be in. I don't know if everybody has went and walked around this area. It's a nice place to be in Rolla. And it'll, I think, and it's been historic. Most of it's been zoned multifamily and commercial, believe it or not, even though it's mostly houses, it's zoned commercial. And so one of the things that our thing we'll be talking about again later on tonight is we're readopting the zoning map, and proposal is to rezone a majority of this area to the UR urban residential zoning district that would allow for some smaller scale multifamily type development. So the potential for development for redevelopment in this area is there, and it's got good bones, as they say.
I'm
Mayor,
curious.
if I may. Go ahead.
I'm curious, how do we break down the language to the people there, explain to the impact of having this done in their community and how they need to be involved? I'm sure whoever has rental properties can understand in commercial, but how do we break that down to people who are owners and may not feel as though their say-so has any impact in this? Or what would be the impact of this to them if they own a house there?
I mean, I think the best answer I can give is communication. If they call me up, I can explain it to them one-on-one. It's not a problem, really. I haven't.
Okay.
I've had a couple reach out, who are just curious about what's going on, and only a handful when it came to this rezoning of the area. The other parts of town, there were a number of people who were concerned. This part of town, same zoning, very few concerns. So it's I don't know if it's anyway. It's just a different area.
I think so.
Rob?
I was just going to say, the big takeaway that I got from the meeting was that, I think it's really important for, and this is what I heard from the people, is the historic preservation, but yet allowing those zoning for new development. And I understood, and the way you just answered that wasn't exactly the way I understood it. So now I got to clarify from what you just said and what I was thinking. So I thought that this zoning process was going to make it easier for somebody to go in and do some development. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay,
Yeah, 'cause
because that's
right
not
now-
what I just heard you say. I'm not getting on to you, but
okay.
that's not what I just heard
No,
you say. So.
a lot of this area is zoned commercial right now, and the commercial district doesn't allow for residential development. So if you have a house there in the middle of a
Right.
block with houses, you can't do a duplex or an apartment, something like that without having to rezone, and you might not be approved if you're one lot in the middle of a sea of commercial.
So you
zoning,
think that this will give more opportunity? That's what I was
Yeah, I would say
driving at.
so.
Okay,
And the
thank
UR
you.
district, it's flexible enough that it also allows for commercial where commercial is appropriate, because one can apply for a conditional use permit just depends on what type of commercial use and where they're at. So I think it'll greatly increase the potential for properties, and I think the demand is coming for that area also, so I think we will see some changes in this area. The hope is to allow for change to happen, but also, I'd like to have my cake and eat it too, but I think everybody wants to preserve the old buildings and things like that, so this does allow for, I think one thing that it would allow for far as preservation goes, if you have one of those big old houses, it would allow for it to be converted by right into at least 4 apartment units instead of having to be torn down in order to do something different. So I hope that it'll kind of, in some ways, it'll help with some preservation of some things, but Rolla right now doesn't have preservation requirements either. So we'll see what comes out of this neighborhood plan. If there is any part of town that some sort of preservation requirement might be appropriate, it'd be this neighborhood. So we'll see how people feel about that.
Tom, I might just add to that if I can. I think the distinction is we do see this as an opportunity for reinvestment in that area, but it's a reinvestment to be more compatible with the character of the area, as opposed to an intense redevelopment commercially. And that may be where that language is getting
Yes.
confused. We're talking about reinvestment, but not on large-scale retail commercial, but on more flexible residential with a neighborhood feel in its commercial application.
Yeah, because there's some restrictions, like you can't
Right.
build something. Yeah, right. Got it.
I want to give the Schuman as kind of an example of this, because, one of the things that the city heard through those outreach programs in Schuman was property owners, individual homeowners concerned with the encroachment of multifamily housing going east from the university. And their point was, we want to preserve the character of single-family homes. I think the city took that into consideration, and I think Tom and John sort of divided the Schuman area really into two zones, if you will. So I think that's a point we're trying to make, is that people hear different things. So I think when we're saying is that this would encourage development, that doesn't necessarily mean housing is going to go to commercial.
Yep.
Any other questions for Tom? Okay, so that's an update. You're going to send council the Schuman report so they see what that did. And what's your timeline on this? You're going to come back in the fall?
Late summer or early fall is the plan.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the ordinance adopting the final version of proposed Chapter 42. Before we start that, on page 16, there's something in there that made it through that it's not intending to be there, and that's where we talk about overnight shelters in C2. So overnight shelter, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but overnight shelters and where that will go or not go, new overnight shelters will be addressed in that particular area of the code at a later date.
But any feedback is a good time to have that on first reading of this.
Right, so this is coming out of here.
It can come out if council wants to remove it out of there.
I have a question. Can you turn the speakers up? We can't hear a thing back in the back.
We'll have to
Maybe
just
if we
talk
can
about
all
some-
talk in our mic a little bit better, probably would. I know that's a,
Thank you.
I'm horrible with that.
Okay. All right, so new overnight shelters, we're going to come back and address in that part of the code at a later date. Is that correct?
Well, we blended all of that in. That's what Tom was clarifying, is he's added all of that new language into this ordinance. So if there's some discussion about where the overnight shelters can go, this would be a good time to have that discussion.
But ultimately, we're going to have to change the other one. Is that true?
No? I mean, this would affect that change here.
The current overnight shelter ordinance is in Chapter
Is in
42. We're
42.
readapting the whole thing, so
Okay, so we're going to do it all at once?
yeah.
For new shelters,
it would include for
Yeah.
new shelters, yes.
as opposed to something that's existing that's effectively grandfathered?
Right, that doesn't really change.
Legal
as far as them,
non-conforming.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. Thanks for that clarification. Go ahead, Tom.
All right, I gave a long talk last time. You don't want to hear all that again, do you? So with this time, we've got an ordinance for first reading, perhaps. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the ordinance. The first little bit is what that ordinance does is there's basically readopts Chapter 42 because there's so many changes. We're just readopting the whole thing. That's Exhibit A. That would be an attachment. That's the zoning and subdivision regulations. You should have a copy of that. There's also, this ordinance was also readopt the official zoning map. That's Exhibit B. That's a big map. Got a copy of it on the back wall. Should have been, I hope you had access to a PDF to be able to zoom in and whatnot to see all that. This ordinance also repeals chapters 29, 39, and 40 because the information is either not needed anymore or it's being folded into this Chapter 42. So we don't need those separate chapters anymore. It also makes some changes to Chapter 15, 20, 28, and 41. Those are basically when they make some sort of reference to a zoning or land use. If we changed something with the zoning, we needed to change something in that chapter as well. And also moving some things around and whatnot. And then there's also a section that would allow for permits to be issued under the old codes, the current codes that we have now today. If for a period of 6 months, if by chance somebody comes along and they have, what they want to claim, they have what's called vested rights, or they prefer the way things were, or whatnot. So basically, if somebody was working on a project, we don't want to change things up for them, midstream. So this would give people 6 months to get their plans ready and get it submitted, and they could be reviewed under the current regulations. And also has a provision in there to allow for them to appeal to the Board of Adjustment if there's some disagreement. So then the actual zoning and subdivision regulations, that Exhibit A that I referred to, there are a couple changes to that from what you saw last time. Number one, I added a little bit of clarity to that citywide rezoning and text amendment thing as we discussed last time. Basically just said kind of on a case-by-case basis, if the city's doing a rezoning or a text amendment, the city's going to go and try their best to notify all impacted property owners. And then there were a couple of typos type things that went ahead and corrected. So this, what you have in front of you should be the most correct as of right now version. And then just to summarize about this in general, again, this zoning code update should provide a little bit more order and make it easier for the public to understand what's going on with these requirements. The current codes can be difficult to understand. It also corrects a lot of errors and typos and conflicts and some unnecessary requirements that are in the current code. It addresses some issues which required variances so that we don't keep granting the same variance over and over again. Should make some processes a lot easier than they are currently today. It also addresses some compliance issues with the state laws. As the state laws change, our zoning code didn't change. And just as a part of all this, because we're changing zoning districts and getting rid of some, adding some, the official zoning map must be readopted as a part of all this. The Planning and Zoning Commission, they at their last meeting, they did recommend approval of, not their last meeting, the meeting before last meeting, recommend approval of this code amendment by a vote of 6-0. I didn't know if you wanted to open the public hearing again, so I've got that slide. But you opened it last time and I believe closed it. But anyway, do you have any questions for me before you move on?
Let's start with council first and see where that takes us. So, council, questions or comments?
I just wanted to say, council spent a significant amount of time on the decision to not permit overnight shelters in the C2 zoning district due to promoting the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. We had hundreds of people reach out to us and wanted us to represent them. So I think that's something we need to take in consideration.
I agree with that, Megan, thank you.
And so as it's written, the following uses are permitted, excuse me, let me clear my throat. The following uses are permitted with approval of a conditional use permit in this current, as it's written here. So if an overnight shelter, a brand-new overnight shelter decided to open in C2, they would have to go through a conditional use permit. Is that correct, the way this is written?
Yes.
Okay.
And it would be brand new or an expansion of a current shelter.
Sure, yes.
Yes.
So one of the points of clarity that I've been asked several people is, and rightfully so, individuals in the downtown area asking about C2 and overnight shelters. And as we read this, I think it should give the individuals that are asking those questions some, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but some sense of it has to go through a process, the conditional use permit process, in order for an overnight shelter to be built in that section of the community. So, I received several calls and emails about this subject, and I believe the way we've addressed it here helps clarify that to some degree. I don't know if pushing the idea of what a conditional use permit involves would help people understand, but I think understanding that you can't just, tomorrow I'm going to open an overnight shelter in C2 without a conditional use permit. You can't do it according to the new ordinance. Am I correct, Tom?
That would be correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, again, I recall very vividly the discussions that council had about
Lance.
trying to protect
your
health and
mic.
safety.
Sorry.
But I want to point out that this isn't about health and safety. This is about land use.
Correct.
And when you start talking about land use, the question is there any property located in that zone that would be appropriate for that use? If you take C3 and put it into C2, and you agree that there was property that was in C3 that was appropriate, and you put it in C2, you can't then come back and say that that land is now inappropriate because you changed the label upon it. if you believe all of the land that is currently in C2 is inappropriate, it's not going to make it more appropriate by putting C3 land in it. So you're missing the big picture. Imagine looking at property stacked on top of each other. This is C2 and this is C3. It's geographically irrelevant that not all of it sits that way. But the point is, if you look at it, everything in C3 is not appropriate for the purpose of a shelter. It has to have a CUP. And everything that you've put in C2 is inappropriate because you've already said that that is not an appropriate function. But if you shift the line from C2 down to C3, you haven't changed the fact that some of this in C2 is now still appropriate. But it's only appropriate if a CUP is granted. It's not a question about public safety. It's a question of land use. And if it was appropriate for land use before at a location, then it's still proper at that location, whether it's called C2 or C3.
I just see.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
That was helpful.
I just, whenever going to Missouri Municipal League conferences and you hear them talk about the purpose of zoning. And the purpose of zoning is to promote the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So that's the purpose of zoning. And you have individuals that have spoke out, and you had this council spend a significant amount of time on this issue, saying that, we've all agreed that C2
Ms.
is
Johnson, do you understand that if you include C3 into C2, that land is still the same land?
I understand it's the same land, but it will now be, and
But
we
is-
tried to address this last year, but for some reason, we
But
weren't.
you understand that if it was appropriate when it was called C3, it would still be appropriate when it's called C2? The existing land, correct?
I mean, if it's rezoned, do you think that it would be?
I think that it is still going to have a question of whether or not there is land that is appropriate. And if you're saying that it becomes inappropriate because you change its label, you're mistaken.
Well, I look at this and I see that we do have other options available, and we are here to, us, the council body, is here to represent the people. We are here to represent the people, and that's what I hear the people saying, that they feel that it's a safety concern to have overnight shelters permitted in C2. And so I very much would like to see it not permitted in C2 as we originally agreed upon.
You're talking about these folks here.
I'm talking about.
Folks, do you
the
understand
general.
that if you take C3 land and put it in C2, and it was appropriate that C3 land was appropriate, it doesn't become inappropriate because you put it into C2? Sorry, I'll say it as many different times as I possibly can.
I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to say that, we represent the people, so that's.
There was also a motion made last time to make it not approved in the C2, I'm sorry, in the C3 zone, and it was said, I had this concern that this would come eventually.
Yes.
I was like, we need to have this discussion. Now it's like, well, no, we'll confront this later because it'll basically come back up when this rezoning thing occurs. So there was concern at the time also. So I'm only saying, I understand what you're saying, I appreciate that, but there was concern at that time also of it being included in C3.
And the point that I am making is still the same point that I've been making all along. If you have a parcel of property that is listed in any zoning, that it would be appropriate, it doesn't become inappropriate by changing its label. It's either appropriate or it's not. It's gonna be investigated. If it's in C2, it'll still be investigated. And if you think it's inappropriate because it was inappropriate before, it will remain inappropriate. But if you have a piece of property that was in C3 that's appropriate, it's not gonna make it inappropriate simply because it changed its label.
So one of the things that I have an issue with is that we were told, and I think Nathan brought up the point, and his point was that, wait a second, we're thinking about changing zoning, and then our response to that was, that's not even happened yet. And so now it's happening, so we're trying to figure out how do we navigate this to our original intent.
Well,
No, I know, the layers, I got it.
But I have a question though, Lance. I do,
It's two different conversations.
All right, it's not, because what I'm telling you is you're gonna look at the parcel. You're gonna know whether that parcel was in C2 before or C3 before.
Yes, exactly. And also, 10 years from now, I'm probably not going to be on this council.
And that's fair.
That's fair?
Lance.
I'm hoping that I'm not sitting here.
Right.
So Lance, my
What I'm saying
question.
is
Hold on,
that
hold on. One at a
other people, other councils will make decisions on conditional use. It's not this council going to make that decision.
And this council shouldn't be trying to bind future councils anyway.
That's true.
Because
That's
in the
true.
future, something could happen to a parcel of property, making it entirely appropriate
Yep.
or entirely inappropriate.
Good point.
I understand what you're saying about the layers, but here's what I don't understand about it. When the C2, we decided to say those overnight shelter was not permitted there. Now we're opening that up in those areas where, I understand what you're saying about layers, but we decided as a council not to permit them there in the C2. So it's, that's the piece I don't understand. It's like, yes, I understand that the C3, we said yes with a conditional use, but it was purposeful for the C2 areas. So what happens to all of them folks that, you know, when that was decided, that now it is under conditional use permit?
Let me ask something to clarify your layers.
Okay.
And I hate the term, I absolutely hate the term grandfathering, but in your example, if you have property out there today, this property is in C2, this is in C3 today. And we're saying that if this all passes, they all get one label called C2. But that C3 parcel, for purposes of this discussion, does it still have C3 potential uses? Or C3 goes away and now we're on C2 uses?
That's what this body gets to decide. I
But-
mean, you get to make the definitions for what takes place in C2. The point that I'm trying to make is, stop thinking of shelters, just think of the type of use that would entail. If there's problems with parking, is that going to be a problem with, is that problem with parking going to change? No, it would continue to be. So,
Okay, so we have currently no C2, but C3 with conditional use permit. So to Matt's point, although we're calling now this general C2, it still requires a conditional use permit.
100%.
That this or some future council still controls whether or not a shelter can go on that property.
And what conditions, if any, that would allow them to be an appropriate use of that property.
Okay.
So,
we're not saying C2 is by right.
not even remotely. In fact, anytime you have a CUP process, you first say, is there any possibility that this property could be used for that purpose? And then, what conditions, if any, are required to make it so that it doesn't impact the surrounding area? That process doesn't change. So, this council, or any future council that is looking at property, is gonna look at whether or not a particular parcel is appropriate and what conditions would need to be imposed on that parcel to make sure that it remained appropriate. Does that make sense?
And Mayor, if I can add, so in the new code, which brought in this overnight shelter use, the whole discussion still on what is allowed under a conditional use permit is still in this new draft. It starts on page 37. And so in addition to now being allowed in C3 zones, C3 would be sort of merging in with the C2, we still require a 750-foot minimum distance from any school, playground, daycare, as measured by the closest point. So that was a distance the council, under the C3 zoning classifications, was comfortable with at least the potential of a CUP, as long as it met that condition and others. So now if you blend that C3 use into the C2, you're actually adding more territory, not a lot more territory, but some more territory where a overnight shelter could be placed. One of the options council could have is modify or extend that distance from school, playground, daycare as measured. So we agreed to 750 feet in C3, and that limited a lot of the C3 area. That distance, and I think we need to study that. We'd have to look at that a little closer to see if that went to 1,000 feet from those uses, what would that do? It still allows some reasonable zoning areas where that could go. An area that we could add to this, but we'd have to be really careful, I think, is a distance from a residential zone, or at least R1. I'm not sure you'd want to do that with R3, but you could add to this a separation from school, playground, daycare, or R1 zoning district. So I think there are some options, but clearly, by eliminating C3, merging it with C2, we have opened up potentially more area where an overnight shelter could go. And that seems okay to us, as long as there are reasonable conditions imposed as a core of the ordinance, which is we have starting on page 37, or anything else that a future council wants to add to that within reason.
So, John, we can't put in land use requirements to effectively prevent somebody from doing so.
Correct. Not a legal operation.
Right. So the 750, as I remember, was decided because there are limited areas within the city of C3. So let's just say 1,000 or 2,000 feet in a C3 would have crossed that boundary to say, oops, we're zoning somebody out of business. So what you're saying now is C2 has a broader geographic area, so we might be able to accomplish the same thing, not cross the line of zoning them out of business, but putting a little more buffer in there, but by going, pick a number, from 750 to 1,000.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that's we haven't looked at that, but that wouldn't be I mean, it's not an easy undertaking to look at all the C2, the proposed C2 area, and to look at the distances of churches, playgrounds, schools, et cetera, to give you a visual of what areas where an overnight shelter could go, and then what that impact would look like if it was 1,000 feet, or something like that.
John, I don't mean to jump in here, but the last time we looked at something similar to this was when we were looking at medical marijuana several years ago, and talking about the locations that they would go and fit. And when you start numbering, or when you start talking about the number of spaces that you're including, you're not talking about a significant amount of C2 zone property that would exist today. In fact, I dare say it may not change much at all from what it currently is because of those offsets that are required.
Yeah. And so I think we can look at it specifically from this perspective. I agree with you. Yeah.
And if I may add, just backing up, the reason why it's unfortunate these two issues are kind of intermingling together in this way, but the reason why the C2 and C3 district to begin with were looked at to be combined together, I guess, and first of all, the name, just because it says C2, it's not the same as the old C2. It's the old C2 is the general retail district, and then there's the C3 is the highway commercial. This is just a general commercial. So I mean, it's also intended to be a completely different zoning district from what we had before. But the reason why we looked at combining these together is if you look at our zoning map, basically both zoning districts in the city has been basically used interchangeably. So you look at our commercial corridors, it'll be C2, C3, C2, C3. And so my point is that even if, you know, we're having this argument about is homeless shelter appropriate in C2 or not, in these corridors where we're talking about it all coming together in the same zoning district, they would have been appropriate to rezone to C3 anyway if they would have come in to rezone. So this is just kind of going ahead and doing that. And there's also properties that are inappropriate, probably shouldn't have been zoned to C3 in the past that are that you probably wouldn't want to approve a conditional use permit for a homeless shelter for. So that I just wanted to give you explain why this is even coming up, and as I said, it's unfortunate that it's coming up in relation to this homeless shelter issue.
So Tom, if a overnight shelter wanted to go, say there was a manufacturing area, but it was next to a commercial area, they could have that commercial property rezoned. into manufacturing, so it would be allowed. Correct?
Just a moment.
So-
Under a CUP.
Right. so
It's still a conditional use
essentially-
permit in its own manufacturing.
Right, but so essentially, if there was a commercial property that they would like to go to, and it was in the comprehensive plan that it was around manufacturing or R3, because they have several areas that they could go into, they can have that potential property rezoned to what will fit where they're allowed. Correct?
Correct?
Okay. I just
What if
wanted
the
to make
property
sure.
changes hands? Somebody says, I want to build a shelter, they get a manufacturing zoning. Oops, we changed our mind, we want to put a manufacturing plant there.
That happens all the time. it
Happens
seems
all the
like.
time.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. So when you look at rezoning and go into commercial and manufacturing, you have to assume that anything could go there.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just saying that there's more freedom than it seems, because they could go and rezone next to something that would fit the comprehensive plan.
I think I have a question for, were you finished? Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm done.
Lance, I think I have a question for you. There would be limitations still to a CUP, though. Like, you can't arbitrarily choose whatever restrictions you want to. Like, you're acting like, it's like, well, at that point, we can choose, do what you want to with the CUP when the time comes. But that's a very limited process of what you can say at that point as well, correct?
Again,
You can't be prejudiced.
Oh, I understand,
you
yeah.
cannot be discriminatory.
Right.
So again, if they're appropriate land use controls, you can use whatever land use controls are appropriate. But you can't be discriminatory.
Fair.
I mean, I don't understand exactly why we have, we don't even regulate a sexual business. I mean, that would be by right in areas that you wouldn't allow a shelter. So, I mean, I think you might have more concerns about some of those and where they were located than you would.
One of past council had a lot of concerns about that and spent a lot of time dealing with that as well.
But,
Right.
Yes.
but they weren't required for a CUP in every area. Some of them are by right. Just saying. I mean,
So I see we're talking about this issue, and this was something that was motioned actually several times to try to fix back last year. Because I know I motioned, I think, maybe twice to try to get, C2 and C3 to be in sync, because administration had told us, we'll be talking about that soon, that they'll merge. And the way it came across to council is, and maybe I'm wrong, but that it would be talked about way down the line, where it was actually after we passed the ordinance, it was a month and a half that, maybe less than a month and a half that we started talking about this. So, I
I don't think, yeah, we did say we were going to talk about it down the line, which we're doing today. But that's different than saying the advice that council's given is changing. The advice that council has been giving us then and today is still the same.
I agree.
Right. So I would actually like to, again, I guess, make a motion for, to remove it to be permitted from this proposed, from the proposal, I want it to be removed, so it is not permitted to allow in C2. So overnight shelters to not be allowed in C2 zoning districts.
Where would it go?
Well, they have multiple places that they are allowed.
R3 and M's.
R3 and M's.
Right, and so
Under CUP.
if there was an area that, that they found that they liked, they could go to that area. They would just have it rezoned to one of the areas that they're allowed in. So if there was, a commercial property that they had their heart set on, and it was around manufacturing, just get it rezoned.
Do we have a proper motion?
Do you want me to make it more, I can make it more proper.
It was a little choppy.
Okay. I would like to make a motion that we amend the proposal to remove overnight shelters from being permitted in the C2 zoning district.
you got that?
If we can just give the specific zoning district reference, it's section 42-222, subsection 2F on page 16.
Thank you,
Just so
John.
everyone see that specific reference.
Yes.
Got it?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Council discussion. Let me say this. There may be other topics you want to talk about. It's really, this is a complex subject, not the shelters, but Chapter 42 in general. So one of the things as city administration that we would ask, it's the same thing that I asked when we did the shelter ordinance. 11th hour changes are a killer on something that's complex like this. So if council wants to make changes, I would ask you to go through the process now. If it means us delaying that final reading, that's fine. But by the time we get to that final reading, I think we would all want to be on the same page.
Sure.
Not that that night we're pulling amendments and changes out of the sky. So that's my first request. The second thing is picking back on what John said about distances. You're effectively don't want us to do that work. We would just rather strike C2. That's your decision tonight. It's your decision to make. We'll live with it, but that's it. Any other council comments before we do the motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I want to at least put on the record, if council votes to do this, I want to put in the record that it's against the advice of council.
And city administration. Okay, there's a motion, there's a second. Any further council comments? Roll
So
call
just
vote.
as, no, I do
hold
have
on.
a comment. Go ahead.
I'm concerned about the legal implications that we put ourselves into, and I get why Lance is saying what he's saying. I don't think that people that are in this zone, that have properties that are in that zone, completely understand the conditional use permit process and understand what it takes. Believe me, I ran for council because I wanted to control some problems in our community, but I also don't want to create problems financially for our community as well, which is what I think we're doing here. I think leaving it in conditional use permit puts us in a position where you have to go through the process and you have to show that the land use in that area is appropriate for what you're trying to do. That requires hearings, that requires the work to be done. I think it still puts our community's voice into this. Whereas if we remove this completely, where you can't nowhere know how in C2, we're removing the community's voice altogether. So that's my stand on it.
I think how we, I know I've said this twice now, but, you know, if an organization wanted to go into an area that the comprehensive plan fit, it would be pretty easy and understandable to change that zoning to go to the location that they're wanting to. And again, I have to remind council that we were elected to represent the people, so it might not be the easiest decision to make, but that is what we're here for. We are here to represent the people that elected us.
You were elected to represent the citizens, but there's a couple of caveats there. Caveat one, you do it effectively. Caveat two, you do it in such a way that you can really benefit them if these things get legal challenges.
Right.
So it's easy to be a populist. It's easy to have bylines out there, but
Well, and
there's a
I-
little more than saying, I'm trying to please every person in Rolla.
And I understand that, and you're an elected official as well, and we do have to think about the safety concerns of the public. Thanks.
So if I may, I don't know if this strikes a middle ground, but is there a way that with the Chapter 42, that we can just separate that out and keep C3, C3, and keep C2, C2? I mean, there's a lot of changes that we're making with Chapter 42. Is there a burning thing that we have to make that change? So, because if we don't, then it's an easy solution.
I was going to say this, ask the same question.
So all of the benefits that Tom put up there earlier all go out the window because we don't like where a shelter could go. That's essentially what you're saying.
No, I'm trying to bring about a resolution to a juggernaut here. So no, I didn't think about all the implications, but I wanted to start the conversation. If it's a short conversation, that's fine.
Are there more benefits than detriments? So let's go back, Tom. You started out by saying, by combining these, there's gonna be a whole fistful of potential benefits to the community. What are those benefits again?
Let me come back to that and make sure I understand what you're asking, but we probably could pretty easily put together some sort of map that shows what additional properties in reality this would allow somebody to apply for a CUP for, because as I said, a lot of the properties are on the highways that are zoned C2. If any of those people came in to rezone the property to C3, it'd be a slam dunk case. I don't think you even, if it's on a highway, I don't see how you could even deny something like that. If it's between things that are zoned C3, that'd be pretty hard to deny, even if they came in and said they're doing it for a homeless shelter. So if we took and analyzed which properties would be almost a slam dunk case if they were to come in to apply to C3, and then looked at what's left, it wouldn't be very many properties. That's really what we're talking about, is the handful of properties that aren't on highways that are zoned C2. And then what was your question? I forgot.
I think if I'm trying to piggyback on what Rob is asking, and that is, I believe, going back to a C2 and C3.
Yeah.
Right?
What do we lose?
Right.
Yeah, so there's a certain amount of benefits of combining these two. If we go back and unravel everything we did over the course of the year, what does that mean?
It wouldn't be very easy to come up with a new C2 and C3 zone based on what we've got proposed. I'm sure it could be done, but it wouldn't be terribly easy, because right now this proposed C2, as I said, it's not the old C2. It's a new zoning district. So we thought very long and hard about how to make this, merging the two together, how to make that work. And so we'd had to figure out how to undo that and then make that talk to the rest of the code. It's not just as easy as saying bring back the C3, because the way our old code, the way it did things, just doesn't talk to what's proposed.
Before we have a roll call vote, any other council questions?
I would just have one, and this, Lance, you may be able to correct me if I misunderstand, but under the zoning use table, so basically a lot of the concern has been over restriction, and I appreciate that. But under section 42.710, the zoning use table, it's not unprecedented to have things conditional use exclusively. So mobile homes and manufactured homes are not permitted anywhere. There's one that's with restriction under manufactured homes. Medical marijuana cultivation facilities is permitted in one, nothing else anywhere else. Medical use is conditional across the board, nothing permitted. So that's been a part of the concern is over restriction. And I understand that correctly, that there are other ones. This wouldn't be like we're picking one to pick on or something like that. It's trying to find proper use in proper locations, as some of these other unique ones we've tried to find proper use based off of those as well.
The distinction I would make specifically would go to the fact that when you're talking about mobile homes and stuff like that, you're talking about things with health and sanitation.
Things with what?
Health and sanitation that actually run with the property.
Okay.
The way the property is used. That, I have not heard any discussion that has anything to do with how the property is used for a mission
An overnight shelter.
an overnight shelter. Sorry, words got synonymous.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So, Mayor, before I vote on this, I would like to just understand, you said something about 1,000 feet. Okay, so that's not officially in play right now.
No.
Can you speak a moment to that?
I think what I was driving at is Tom alluded to it just a few minutes ago about looking at maps. John has alluded to it, say, look, we can get some maps and play with the 750 to 1,000. If that's what you want to use before you make your decision, at least that's where we were headed. The motions that are on the floor, throw that in the trash and
Oh, right.
So that's your choice, which way you want to go.
Which I will say, you've played with the maps before when we talked about the 750. So that was, if you go back, I think there was, where they had given us a map of the 500, 750, and then 1,000 radius. Back when we discussed this last year.
But if the motion as it is, and if you pass it, then we're not going to do that work.
Correct.
Right.
That's the point I'm
Understandable.
coming to.
Yes.
Those are your options.
Yeah, point of information. If I need to recuse myself from voting on this matter, do we do it right now, beginning of it?
Doing a roll call, you would abstain, if that's what
Okay.
you want to do.
I wasn't sure if that was the same abstaining or,
Well, that's good, but is there another version?
Abstaining in this instance works as a no vote. It's a number of votes in favor.
Affirmative votes,
Yeah.
yeah.
The majority of the council has to pass, so that's,
okay.
but if you don't want to vote, if you want to abstain, you abstain, doing the roll
I
call.
feel like there's a personal issue that's come up that's conflicting them, that will not allow me to vote on this.
Okay, just doing a roll call, just abstain then.
And I might even suggest a little further. So if there's a potential conflict of interest in not knowing the specifics, I would recuse myself from even the discussion.
And I haven't participated in it at all.
Yeah, that's the way to.
Okay, roll call vote.
So could we hear the motion one more time?
Yeah.
Just because we've been all over the place here.
I'll read it back.
Thank you.
Motion to amend a proposal to remove overnight shelters from being permitted in C2 zoning,
District.
right?
We might just say permitted as a conditional use permit
Yeah.
in C2 zoning.
It'd be moved to a not permitted.
Right.
We don't have a not permitted, it's just either permitted
That's
or
what it
not.
says.
Oh, yeah, that's what it says in the.
Not permitted, the X is not permitted.
Yeah,
You're
look
wanting
at the text.
the motion to say what?
Sorry. You do your thing. Sorry, John.
It's exactly what you said, Lori. You had it.
Okay.
What?
Roll call. Hall,
No.
Mayberry,
No.
Sherman,
Yes.
Greven,
No.
Roman,
No.
Steen,
No.
Cassinger,
Sorry, but no.
Higgins,
No.
Balch,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Fredley,
No.
and you abstained.
Yes, smell.
3 ayes.
Okay, so let's pick up the pieces. Before we go to another topic in 42, does council want to talk about this one some more?
So because the motion didn't pass, will we look into the distances then?
We will,
Okay?
if that's what the council as a body chooses.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
So you need to, as a body, tell us to do that. Preferably in a motion.
So, Mr. Mayor, reflecting on last year, I just remember the discussion saying that it was not a possibility to do that, even in any zoning, so it's.
We were concerned with 1,000 in the C3, but as we've expanded the C3 somewhat, it may actually bring in more properties now. So I don't know that we can say.
I mean, 1,000 just sounds excessive, that's why I thought it better to
It's
go
up-
with what
it's 750
all
now.
of the council wanted before, so.
Yeah. So it's 750 now, we've expanded the area where potentially it could go. It would seem worth looking at whether or not 1,000 foot gives us still some reasonable options where somebody could apply for a CUP in that C2 zone. But that's up to you.
And what has to happen to keep it, basically where a first reading doesn't happen tonight? Does that have to be a motion also? That way it's not, because you wanted to avoid this all happening in the final hour, like you said.
Well, you could do either. We could set the whole thing aside, go through all of this stuff, or we could have the first reading, but delay the second reading until you make all your changes. Either way,
Okay.
right?
So we wanted to hear a motion to consider or see
Look
like
at 1,000 foot
1,000
distance.
feet would be with the proposed text of the C2, C3 zone.
Why don't we phrase it as, we want a pictorial of the impact of this change at several distances.
Okay.
What does the 750 look like? What does the 1,000 look like? So you can see on a map where these could go or not go.
And Tom, would this change the method of how it's measured? Because there was a conversation at Planning and Zoning about there being a change of how it is measured by radius versus by how you walk.
I think you're getting confused with the marijuana stuff.
It is. I'm making sure that that's not changing also as a part of this.
So the reason that was different is because the medical marijuana created a specific method of measurement.
By the state.
And it had to be it could not be less than that. So you had to use their rate of measurement to determine whether or not your rate of measurement was longer or shorter. You don't have that here.
I understood that.
So what this is going to be by the crow from the nearest property line of one to the other?
Yeah, the language is the closest point of the shelter facility to the closest point of such school, playground, or daycare.
You say shelter facility, that's the land or the building?
Of the facility, it'd be the building.
The building, okay.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay, any other comments, questions, modifications on any other part of these proposed changes to chapter 42?
Do we need to make a motion on that? On what you just clarified? there?
Pictorial, I think.
The pictorial?
Yes, yeah.
Do we need to make a motion?
Go ahead.
of that? I'll make a motion of what the mayor said.
A motion
And I'll
to
second
see a
that, Nathan.
pictorial Of impact of this change at several distances.
Perfect.
And I'll second.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call vote.
Broman,
Yes.
Florence,
Abstain?
Steen,
Yes.
Greven,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Chirvin,
Yes.
Fredley,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kessinger,
Yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Balch,
Yes.
11 ayes.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions on the rest of the proposed changes for chapter 42?
I have a legal question for Mr. Thurman. What is the legal definition of grandfathered?
The microphone.
And I can tell you why I'm asking. On page.
We don't want to use that term.
Well, that's why I was asking.
We don't
So
wanna
on-
use that term.
On page 1 of section 100, line 34, that reference is made, and I wonder if we might want to take that out.
Change.
I'm fairly certain that will be removed.
Okay.
Yes, good idea.
Legal nonconformity is what the real term is.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion on that. When I saw it
Grandfathering is a
merged,
terrible word.
I was surprised.
How far you want me to take that history lesson?
No, when I saw.
Aren't you impressed that I learned something?
Legal non.
Legal non-conforming.
Okay, if there's no other questions, moving on to claims and/or, okay, so we're going to delay it for,
We're going to,
delay the first. There's no rush on this.
Thank you.
Delay the first reading.
Thank you.
Okay, claims and/or fiscal transactions, we have 4. First is a resolution to award financing for a pumper truck.
Good evening. At the last council meeting, council authorized the fire department to purchase a 2023 rescue pumper truck. The financing bid amount that was sent out was $975,000, and it was bid 2 ways, a 10-year term and a 12-year term. We received 6 bids back, and so it's the recommendation of staff to award the financing bid to Town and Country Bank for the interest rate of 4.74% for a 10-year term, making the annual payments for 10 years $124,677.62, with the first payment being in fiscal year 2024. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just in case we're so fortunate, are there prepayment penalties on
In this bid, no. A couple of the other ones did have a prepayment penalty, but not in this one.
Not looking at it. Any questions by council? If not, can we read the resolution? resolution? Yeah. Here.
682.
A resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Rolla, Missouri to execute on behalf of the city of Rolla, Missouri, a contract between the city of Rolla, Missouri and Rolla, Missouri, Phelps County and Town and Country Bank of Rolla, Missouri. Sorry.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
that. There's a motion, second by Tina. Any other questions or discussions? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next item is a review of the proposed budget for the Forum Plaza Community Improvement District. John?
Yeah, a little history. The Forum Plaza Community Improvement District was approved by the City Council in December of 2014. It allowed the developer to be reimbursed for up to $4 million of their $14 million investment in the Forum Plaza area, which contributed to the elimination of that blighting condition of that facility, so established by the City Council at the time. That project has got a current balance of $3.3 million. Approximately $300,000 a year is going towards reimbursement to the developer. So it is not cash flowing to the way the developers had hoped it would do, but it's viable for them. It's still an economic success. It's just not meeting its ability to, with their 1 cent overlay, of retiring the full $4 million reimbursement amount. So one of the requirements of state law is that annually, before the SID board adopts their budget, we submit this to the City Council for review. There is nothing in the law that requires council to approve that. There is no action required of the City Council. It just is a disclosure on the part of that political subdivision. The CID operates independent of the city. 3 of the members of the board make up the property owners, and the mayor and the city administrator by title make up the 4th and 5th seats on the Community Improvement District Board. So happy to answer any questions just about that project, but this will run its full course of 20 years, and then the project will end, and the 1 cent overlay on the Forum Plaza area would go away as well. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions for John? If not, the next item is a motion to ratify the emergency change order for asbestos removal.
Yeah, this is an unfortunate issue. So when we were anxious to tear down the old Ransdell building that the city built some 10, 12 years ago, we had done asbestos testing on the whole facility. We didn't climb up on the roof of the old metal building to check tar that was applied there to keep waterproofing out. When the contractors, remember, we awarded a contract just a month or so ago. We were thrilled with the price. We thought this was going to cost us $80,000, not counting any asbestos, but we had a price in our contractor for about $35,000. As that contractor was taking the building down, they saw this exposed asphalt, tar, and caulking on the roof. They had it tested, they reported to us, we had it tested, and it has come back positive for asbestos. So we scrambled to get quotes for the abatement of that asbestos before that project could continue. The best price we got was $24,775 from Spartan Services, and we authorized that as an emergency procurement to keep that project going. Every day that we are delaying tubs, we would owe them for cost of reimbursement of equipment that they're renting, of labor, and so we're moving on that abatement. And so fortunately, it's one of those tough things that we're coming back to the council after the fact and informing you of an emergency change order that was acted upon. But we, in our procurement process, have that ability, but is subject to reporting it to City Council. So we'd be happy to answer any questions about that project. It still brings it in substantially less than what we estimated the project demolition was going to be at $80,000.
Any questions for John?
So basically, you wind up having to spend 60 instead of 80.
Correct.
60 instead of 35. Would any of the other bids that were sent out have included them looking into, we'd be in the same position but have spent more money?
Correct. That abatement would have been on top of any of the bids we received because we had given them certification in the bid process that there was not asbestos existing in the facility.
And John, I had sent this to you because my question was, why is that not the responsibility of the company coming and doing the bid? And it was because the city had sent out their own people to test for this, and that thus Tibbs, the company, wouldn't be responsible for this because
Correct.
our asbestos-approved people went out and didn't find that.
And in the specs, we stated that there was not asbestos present.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is what it is.
So is there a motion to approve the change order?
I'll make the motion. Go ahead.
Second.
Lori, did you get both names?
You have it.
One of those two.
The two.
I caught the second
I think it was,
Megan.
Rob,
Oh, no.
Rob or
Kevin.
Kevin?
Kevin said it.
Kevin.
Okay.
That's his first.
Cheers, Kevin.
Yay.
all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Last item under fiscal transactions is a motion to approve the purchase of the Genesis extrication equipment. Chief?
Good evening. The fire department's 22-23 budget reflects the purchase of new extrication equipment to be placed in service on the new fire truck that the council approved at the last meeting. This new equipment to be purchased from Firemaster Fire Equipment, the authorized Genesis dealer for our area, includes a Genesis E-Force spreader tool, commonly known as the Jaws of Life, the E-Force cutter, and the Genesis E-Force telescoping ram. This new equipment is all battery operated, which makes deployment of the equipment and the process of extrication much faster and freeing an entrapped victim from a wrecked vehicle. This is sole source purchase, as we currently have this same type and brand of extrication equipment on Ladder 33 or other first line apparatus deployed from Station 1. There are many benefits to keeping this equipment interoperable, such as interchangeable batteries and accessories, as well as consistent equipment operation for fire crews. Fire Administration recommends the approval of purchase of the Genesis extrication equipment from Firemaster Fire Equipment for $35,853. Any questions?
Any questions for Chief?
Is there still non-battery operated ones that are used?
Yes.
And what would those, I'm just curious, what would those cost in comparison?
In comparison, they're actually more expensive.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the battery ones, I'm assuming work well.
Very well, yep.
These things are powerful.
Makes sense then.
They're really fast to deploy because you don't have all the
Yeah.
lines you're dragging behind you. You don't have the portable pump that you have to carry. They're ready to go. And the new ones are actually water resistive. I don't want to say waterproof, but water resistive. So
And this would just fit within the normal budget of the fire department then?
yes, yep.
Okay.
Does it come with backup batteries, or do you need
So
more than one?
And that's why we want to buy the same equipment that we have on our other ladder truck. We already have a lot of batteries. We will be purchasing backup batteries, but this particular equipment doesn't have proprietary batteries like the other equipment does. So Milwaukee Power batteries actually fit right in this equipment.
Okay,
So we can buy those anywhere.
Makes sense.
thanks.
Chief
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah.
I'm curious, is there any other than the fire department, does police department, anyone else has this type of equipment, or is it just you?
Extrication equipment is just on fire trucks. It's big bulky equipment, takes specialized training.
And on average, how many times a year do we actually use that equipment?
Well, Rolla is actually, we have quite a few auto accidents in Rolla. Major accidents that require spreading a door off a car or something like that. Probably maybe 10 major accidents that require that, and probably about another 30 or 40 just short, popping a door on a car or something like that. So the idea of auto extrication is actually removing the vehicle from the person and not necessarily the person from the vehicle, because we want to minimize damage to the person. So.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Question?
No.
If there's no other question, is there a motion to approve the purchase?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion made and second. Any further discussion? If not, roll call vote, please.
Graven,
Yes.
Higgins,
Yes.
Steen,
Yes.
Fredley,
Yes.
Mayberry,
Yes.
Turbin,
Yes.
Balch,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Passinger,
Yes.
Florence,
Yay.
Hall,
Yes.
Roman,
Yes.
12 ayes.
Thank you for that. Next section is citizen communication. We have a lot of people here. I don't want to assume that all of you know how this part of the agenda works. Everyone is willing to speak. We typically allow about 3 minutes, so if there's a position that you have that somebody else has already articulated, perhaps you can just refer to them by reference, or if you want to state the same thing, that's fine, but we ask that you comply with the 3 minutes, particularly with such a large crowd as we have here tonight. For the record, when you come to the podium, we would like to ask your address. If you do not feel comfortable giving your detailed address, then you could say it privately to Lori. But I do ask you to publicly say whether you're a city resident or a county resident. So with that, we have 3 that have scheduled tonight. Terrace, you're up first.
Thank you, Council. I need to show some movies here.
Terrace. Address and whether you're a public
Okay, sorry.
city resident.
I'm Terrace Cates. I own Integrity Engineering, 1714 East 10th Street. I also pastor Harvest Worship Center, which is 1706 East 10th Street.
Thank you.
Okay? Sorry about that.
Terrace, if you're looking at access up on the computer, you can work it off that other screen if you can.
Okay. Sorry, I haven't worked with it here. Okay, so how do I get it to start? I'm not sure how the sound with this movie's going to go. Hopefully it won't overpower me. Anyway, what I want to do, a word is worth 1,000, or a picture's worth 1,000 words. Basically, on June the 10th, there was a Pride event here in Rolla. I gave you packets. You have the flyer in front of you. If you look at the bottom, it's red line. This is an all-ages event. And what I wanted to share with you is that when we thank you, appreciate your service, your heart as civil leaders. But what we're talking about today is a big deal. Tonight, the line is being drawn in the sand. The choices, the actions made from this evening will affect the future of our community and the protection of our children. The precedent we establish in this city.
Is the audio necessary to your point? I mean, keep the video, but the
How
audio
can I
is a
turn
little
it down there? I'm glad to.
Yeah, if you just
Can we get
take
the audio?
Take the audio
Right.
down.
Green scale over there on the right.
Okay, sorry. I can get it monitor here.
That's good, thank you.
My apologies. And anyway, what you're watching here is probably one of the most vile, provocative, reprobate stuff I've ever seen in my entire life. But what we're going to be doing, we're establishing a precedent here in Rolla that's going to reverberate in Missouri and around this nation. We're here in response to the activity billed again as an all-ages event, which occurred on Saturday, June the 10th at the downtown Rolla band shell and on the adjoining city parking lot. Again, please see the flyer that I put in front of you that says all-ages event. Again, we're showing inappropriate videos. I wouldn't want any children to see this, but it shows provocative drag queen performances as part of the Pride event that took place on Saturday here in Rolla. We're not against Pride, we're not against anyone that wants to identify in that, but what we are concerned about is the drag queen shows and all the precious children. So what I want to do, if I can pause this just for a minute, and again, sorry, I'm going to pause that if I can. I want to show you pictures of children, and if I can slide these over here. I want you to see all the children that were a part of this presentation. This is our heritage. Precious children that have no business being in a situation like this in our community. And so again, I'm trying to go through it really quickly, but if you look at down at the bottom, you're seeing all the kids that were exposed to this. Then also what you see here, again, a drag queen with the children coming up, Later on in the movies, you're going to see a drag queen that actually opens up their shirt and has children start putting money in their fake breasts. Again, that's totally inappropriate behavior. Look at these precious kids. And again, they don't know any better. Who's going to protect them? So what I'm going to do is go back to that movie, if I can shut this down here. Thank you. Try to play that where it was. Play. Lori, can you help me? I don't know. Again, trying to turn off this picture here. Go back to this. Again, it's important. I could speak all day, but unless you saw it yourself, that's why I wanted to bring this to you. Again, we're here to discuss our concerns about minors being allowed to attend perverted, reprobate, drag queen shows and readings and inappropriate open public display that occurred in our community. Ryan Slanton, the Republican state representative in Texas, made a statement about drag queens. He said these are perverted adults obsessed with sexualizing our young children. As you noted, Mayor, there's a lot of people here. I'm going to ask all those that are here present with the same concern to stand and show your concern just by your presence here. I want to thank each of you for standing that are here for this reason. Their presence, even though a lot of them aren't going to be able to say anything, there's a concern, a massive concern, that this should not be in Rolla. This is a hometown. This is a family town. You can be seated. Thank you, all of you. It's important that we as a city say no. What occurred is nothing less than child abuse and grooming children for the LGBTQ lifestyle. Adults, that's their choice. We have no problem with whatever choice adults want to make, but it should not be something that's being forced on our children. We, citizens of Rolla, are here to let you know that we need municipal ordinances in place and enforced to protect our children who cannot protect themselves, and to keep our city streets, walks, and public areas free from sensual and provocative displays. We cannot turn our heads and look away. This is something that needs to be addressed in our community now, or it will only get worse. What we permit, we promote. We request that the City Council enact ordinances such as have been enacted in Chesterfield, and in the packet I gave you, there's an ordinance from Chesterfield and Goodman, Missouri. Rolla is not going to be the first one. There's already precedent set, but we need to follow suit, and we need to aggressively take action. Chesterfield and Goodman, Missouri created municipal ordinances that shows a fence for the public display of obscene material and performances harmful to minors, especially banning minors from drag queen, and I didn't even realize that, there's drag kings as well, shows and readings. Also, we request that these sensual and perverted displays be banned from open public areas in our community. It shouldn't be in the band shell, it shouldn't be in a park, it shouldn't be in streets, it shouldn't be on sidewalks, it shouldn't be in our libraries. Missouri Revised State Statutes 573-030 promoting obscenity in the second degree. The penalties: a person commits the offense of promoting pornography for minors or obscenity in the second degree if, knowing its content and character, he or she produces, presents, directs, or participates in any performance pornographic for minors for gain. Please note the video and pictures of the drag queens taking money as a part of their performance. The drag queen host, Roxana Rexia,
Terrace, if you can, another minute.
stated that if there were any LGBT minors without parental support, they would be their drunken Aunt Betty to support them and provide them with alcohol and tobacco products in Aunt Betty's basement. According to the Rolla City Codes, that's an offense. Paragraph A, it is unlawful for any person to encourage, and that's exactly what was happening, to aid or cause a child under the age of 17 years to commit an act or engage in any conduct which would be injurious to the morals or health of that child. We ask that the mayor appoint a committee immediately to address these issues and that the council draft the needed ordinances for passage. There are a number of concerned citizens present that would be glad to serve on such a committee if requested. We are providing ordinance language as promulgated by other communities in front of you. We are not going away. We will not back down or back off. We will not quit, and we will not be silent. Expect to see representatives of our community checking up on the council's progress on these matters. Thank you for your time and understanding of the seriousness of protecting our minors and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Pastor.
Ron, if I could hold you to 3 minutes, I think Tara's did a pretty comprehensive
Yeah,
job
I'm
of
gonna,
that.
I should be
I
hopefully
don't know that
shorter
I want
than
to see
that.
any more of those pictures.
I'm gonna bring that sermon out for you. No. So, I'm not gonna show you the down Terrace story. There's another video. We've got several videos. I don't know if you guys are seeing it or not, but so Mr. Mayor, I got a council. I'm sorry, I should tell you, Mr. Butts and the city workers, we appreciate y'all letting us be here tonight. I'm an old white guy, and I will tell you what the current society would love to do would be to silence old guys like me, because they'll tell you that we're not relevant, that we're racist or we're homophobic, whatever. And I will tell you that the problem I have is that I was born in 1960 in California. I lived through the hippies, I lived through the free love, I lived through streakers. I didn't do that, but I lived through that time in my life. And so I have seen a lot of things, and all these things lead to changes in our society. And none of them are good. When those things happen, our country, our world, our people, we lost some innocence during that time. I'm a father and I have a father of 7. I have grandchildren. I have 17, currently 18 coming right now. And I will tell you that I was a children's pastor for 15 years, and then I'm now a senior pastor. I've worked with children for 25 years, and I was also on a school board. I was 12 years on the Central Heights School Board in Kansas. I was board president for 11 of the 12. So I worked with kids often, and I have seen families recently. I mean, we're being torn apart by drugs and alcohol. You guys know this in our communities. And to allow these types of things to come, just take one step further, taking us towards an abyss that we're going to fall off of, and that we're not going to maybe be able to recover. So now's the time to take an action and say, we're going to take a stand. Again, don't get me wrong, families back in those days were not a lot better than now. There was things back then as well, but it wasn't in their face as much. Right now, these things are in our face. And I don't know of any situation when I was a kid where my mom took us to something where we'd ever see something like this whatsoever. These recent events are just simply the beginning, as Tara said, in Rolla. I moved here in 2013 when I came to pastor at Nazarene Church, and I find Rolla to be a place I want to live. It's a place where families can raise their kids. So these things are not things that we want to promote in our community, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, again, I believe we love everyone. I believe what Jesus told us to do is to love everyone and to accept everyone. I don't need to love the sin, but I love the sinner. So I don't need to love any of that. I'm going to kind of cut short on mine so I get my 3 minutes in. But as a young person, I went to a school that was predominantly Hispanic and black, and so this whole racism thing and all these different issues of I had friends that were gay. We had gay people in the schools then. I don't believe that's what the leaders of your churches in your community are. I believe we all are men of God who love God and want to see people obviously lead a holy life, but these types of things do not help our families or our kids at all. I watched Senator Josh Hawley recently on a video on YouTube where he was speaking at a group, and he gave an illustration from the book of 2 Samuel 24, where King David, he had done something wrong, and the Israel was under plagues. And so what David did is he went to where the plagues were, and he wanted to offer sacrifices to God to ask for forgiveness. And basically, the owner of the land was willing to give him the land, to give him the sacrifice, to give him the cattle, everything he needed to do. And David said, a sacrifice that cost me nothing is not anything. And I know situations like this are going to cost us something as a community. It's going to give us, we're not going to be like the big cities. We're not going to be maybe held in where people think they can do it. But this percentage of people that love these things or want to attend these things is a very small percentage. Your tax-paying, hardworking people are not the ones that want to attend these things. So I'm just going to, I'm going to end with that I believe that we as a community need to take a stand. We need to think about what we want to sacrifice to be a city that is not part of these things, to stand above, be a city above, and be a place where people want to bring their kids to live. That's what I pray that Rolla is. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you, I'm at 1901 East 10th Street, Rolla Church of the Nazarene. And if you need an email, it's rollanazarene@yahoo. Sorry. I'm sorry, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Pastor.
Darren?
Yes, good evening. I might need some help getting the video. I think there's one more video. So my name is Darren Faison. I live at 11540 Forest Lake Drive.
You're gonna have to say that again.
Darren Faison, F-A-C-E-N, 11540 Forest Lake Drive. I also pastor New Dimensional Christian Ministry, 12719 County Road 5110 here in Rolla. And I just want to share some thoughts. And I stand with Pastor Cates and Pastor Ron. I also attended the event out of concern. And I just want to share some thoughts, just a little bit about my personal experience and my personal life. I can recall a time that it seemed that we were concerned about what children were exposed to, and more specifically exposure to things that were related to human sexuality and sex and nature. And I believe that there was a time when adults respected children as children and valued their innocence. I was raised by my grandparents, and I remember my grandmother was on the phone having a conversation with someone, and my brother and I were in the next room, and we could kind of hear the conversation. And I remember her spelling the word B-A-B-Y. And my brother and I started laughing. I think I was probably about 9 or 10. And I was like, we call her TT. I said, does TT know we know how to spell? But the point was, she was protecting us. We couldn't hear what the other person was saying, but she was protecting us from something that she believed that we should not be in earshot of, right? That we shouldn't know. And so today it seems like there's a paradigm shift in how we not only view children, but how we view human sexuality. And it seems like this nation has become obsessed with human sexuality. And part of what my experience has been is I believe that everyone knew that children were not sexual beings, and we didn't view children as a sexual being, right? That we view them as innocent, we need to protect them. And that paradigm shift that children understand human sexuality is really, really out there today. And there's even some expectation that our children should be even educated even more at earlier ages about what human sexuality is, and even view themselves as sexual beings. I was raised by my grandparents because my mother. Yes, I got you. Thank you, man. My mother was a heroin addict, and she had me. I was a prom baby, and she had me at age 17, and was not able to care for me. And then later, she had my middle brother a year later, and my mother really worked hard on regaining her life. And at different times when she seemed to have some stability, my grandparents would allow us to be back with her. And that exposed me to lots of things. I was sexually abused as a child. I was physically abused, emotionally abused, psychologically abused, because of the choices of who my mother allowed in our lives. I was exposed to alcohol, drugs, pornography at a very young age, and those things I would have to deal with later in my life and battle addiction.
Yep.
And so this idea of an Aunt Betty, an uncle, you just name it, those people were always in my life, right, influencing who they thought I should be, whether or not who I really should become. But at that age, you didn't know any better. I thought that's how people lived. I even lived in the Pruitt-Igoe projects, one of the most world-renowned projects in Missouri, St. Louis. That's where I was born and raised. And I can remember walking into the next room because I wasn't able to sleep, and watching my mother shoot up and people having sex and all kinds of things happening in the next room. This was part of my early upbringing. And so my journey in the last 34 years, I've spent my life working with severely emotionally disturbed children, children who have been sexually abused, who've had a very similar journey as I have had, children who are addicted to drugs and alcohol, substance use disorder, as well as adults. I've spent 34 years of my career working in this field and being educated to better help and serve the community so young people have a chance to avoid, if you will, or have an opportunity to come out of that life sooner than I did. And I will tell you every day that I'm in this community.
Can you wrap it up?
Yes, every day that I'm in this community, just as I was at this event, there was a young girl that walked up to me, about 7 or 8, and she said, "I'll give you a hug if you give me $1." And I bent down and I said, "I don't have $1, I don't have any cash money, but certainly I will give you a hug if that's okay." And she was unaccompanied by, I mean, I wouldn't be able to identify if someone was her parent or not, but she was unaccompanied as far as my perspective was. And I gave her a hug and I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And she just shrugged her shoulders. And she just walked off to the next group of people to ask them for money. And I thought in that moment how confused she must be because of what's happening in the environment and where her parents were to give her some guidance about how to perceive her world at that time. And so my appeal to the city council tonight is that I know there's maybe some legal arguments about if there was a crime committed or not, and I understand all that. And we've heard Pastor Cates and Pastor Ron. I certainly support some of the language they're using around this, and that things should be shaped to better help our community deal with some of these issues as they come up. But beyond that, there is a moral obligation, I believe, that we have to protect our children at all costs. And I'm not here to attack a person or persons or a group. And I can tell you certainly I have been attacked most of my life because of what I look like, what I sound like, where I grew up at, the type of family I came from. And it hurt me to see that young lady at 7 or 8 to be in the presence of what she had to be in. It really hurt me to my heart. And so I'm asking the city council to consider whatever we can beyond whatever is legally possible, but morally, to remember we have a moral obligation in serving our community. I'm boots on the ground every day with these young people and adults. I work with adults as well. And I'm boots on the ground with these young people. And I hear all the time, if someone would have been there, if someone could have shared with me what you're sharing now. But it's not too late. So thank you for your time, Mayor and City Council. Appreciate all your hard work and effort in serving the community. And I pray that you all have heard, what the issues are. And this is an attack on the issues, not on a person or persons or a group. This is an attack of an issue that we've got to protect our children. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Darren.
Before the next speaker, all three of you made a very compelling case, and you came at it from different perspectives. So I would ask if there's others that want to piggyback on that same theme, then maybe just say that short and sweet. But before we start, about how many want to speak tonight? Okay, so 1, 2.
There might be some people in the back.
Yep,
back
they
there.
might be outside.
Okay, so we want to give everybody a chance to speak, but if everybody goes more than about 3 minutes, then we're going to wind up limiting the number of speakers. So just be mindful of that time.
I think they came out. I mean, I don't mind staying to listen
It's
to as
okay.
many
I'll
people.
manage it.
For 3 minutes.
Yeah, hopefully.
Agreed.
So my name is Melissa Jones. I am the youth pastor at Rolla First Church of the Nazarene, 1901 East 10th Street. I am the mother of a family that lives at 1120 Highland Drive. I am also a paraprofessional in the middle school for Rolla Public Schools. And I'm speaking because I have direct dealings with our children. And when I have fourth graders who don't understand this topic, being confused by people already in their classrooms, and teachers having to discuss this at a fourth grade level, they haven't even hit puberty yet, and sex is just not a topic we would talk about with them. But they already, without this event, prior to this event, were having those discussions because it's already happening in their world. This just magnifies that. And the fact that they saw it to that level, I am horrified as a parent. I was thankfully out of town. I'm also the adoptive parent of a child who was born addicted to drugs. I'm responsible for her upbringing, and I am fearful to put her in a public school system if this is the kind of thing that this city is going to say is okay. I'm gonna keep her
I
home.
want to stop you. I'm not being rude, but this has nothing to do with the school district.
I agree, but I'm saying if this is.
Concerned, as someone who was given his life and dedicated to the school system, I can assure you, you shouldn't equate the two. This has nothing to do with
Okay,
the school.
maybe I misstated.
And I'm not being rude to you.
I understand. Maybe I misstated. Let me try that again. If this is allowed in society, it permeates our schools whether we want it to or not, because children talk about what they want to on the playground.
Right.
And I'm sorry if I didn't say that correctly. That is what I'm worried about.
Thank you for clarifying that.
It permeates into the school. As employees of the school, we have the kids questioning us, and we're not really equipped or responsible to give that education to them. That really should come from the parentals. So I'm concerned about this event for two reasons: that there were parents that thought it was worthy of taking children. That scares me. But also that there are children whose parents were not. They were just attending because. Mm-hmm. And so I agree on the level that there needs to be something done. And I'm coming at it more as a parent who will then have a child grow up in this city and in that environment, and again, potentially permeating our schools before they're able to make a decision about who they are. It's theirs to make. We've always stood on that. It's theirs to make. I'm not telling anybody. I have plenty of friends that are gay. I have a former coworker that would tell you I gave him a ride to work every day for 3 years, not caring about what he chose to do in his own home. That's not my decision to make, but I want him to make it as an adult, not as a fourth or fifth grader.
Thank you.
I just want to say to Matt, your comment really quick, because I did attend this event, and they had an educational speaker that spoke on the importance of sharing this kind of learning within our school district, and that it was as important as reading and writing.
Mm-mm.
So I think that might have been the thought process there.
I want to apologize for losing my composure, but I can assure you, as someone who's committed to children in this community,
I know you
Yeah,
try your
I
hardest,
get it.
Matt. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so
I get
tired of being lumped into something as an educator. If people truly know who you are, they know it in their actions with their children. They see it when you act in place of the parent. So I apologize for losing my composure, but it is an emotional issue for me as well, because I deal with it on a daily basis.
And you want to protect children.
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Barrett, and I'm here to represent my organization called Gays Against Groomers.
I'm sorry, gays of what?
Gays Against Groomers. I am co-director of our chapters around the country. I also serve as the Missouri chapter leader, and that's why I'm here tonight. We are a coalition of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people that oppose the medicalization, indoctrination, and sexualization of children. I'm going to be talking about the sexualization and indoctrination of kids this evening. It was brought to my organization's attention that an all-ages Pride event was recently held in the city of Rolla, as others here have talked about tonight. There were many problems with that event that made it clear kids should not be there. I saw videos of kids at a drag show, which my organization also opposes. kids giving money to these performers like strippers at a strip club, and disturbingly kids wearing trans pride colors, which is absolutely something that's inappropriate for kids to be exposed to and brings up a whole other range of issues that I won't get into tonight. But perhaps what was most disturbing is what was said. The guest speaker for this event, Rodney Wilson, said that teaching LGBTQ issues in schools was as important as reading and writing. I couldn't disagree more, and this is the wrong message to be sending to kids because our schools need to be focused on a basic education, not kowtowing to special interests that seek to indoctrinate kids into their way of thinking. Schools should teach kids how to think, not what to think. Lastly, the most inappropriate remark, in my opinion, came from a drag queen who asked the audience if there were any kids that had come to this event alone. There was a response from the crowd, and he proceeded to tell them that he will, and I quote, "be your support. I will be your drunken auntie that will let you drink wine coolers and smoke cigarettes in the basement." This sounds like grooming behavior to me, which is what my organization fights against. Does any of this sound kid-friendly to any of you? No. I certainly hope not. I've been to many pride events and drag shows. They can be entertaining and fun, but for adults, not kids. I don't understand why drag in particular has become the new face of the gay community. We have gay doctors, lawyers, firefighters, police officers, and military members. People who just want to lead as normal a life as possible. The vast majority of us do not perform in drag. I understand that some see this as some sort of form of inclusion. Well, I can assure you that this push to expose kids to the so-called LGBTQIA+ community is not helping us, it's hurting us. A backlash is brewing, and the people that allow kids to be at these events, including some in this government, are responsible for that backlash. And most importantly, children are being harmed and confused. This city needs to do something to address this issue so that it doesn't happen again next year. I get it. Being a public figure in politics is hard. It's especially difficult when you go up against the LGBTQIA+ lobby. They are very politically active. They will try to destroy you if you go against them. They and their friends will make death threats. They'll call you a homophobe and a transphobe. Well, as a public figure myself, welcome to my life. I get the death threats. I get called names. But it's my duty to do my job and defend our children no matter what the cost. Now it's time for this council to do the same. Do your job and protect the kids of Rolla. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm sorry?
I'm Greg Bippis. I live here in Rolla. And just want to make the point that we have laws about movies, about public decency, about public nudity. These are all being ignored, and that's wrong. Just to make the point, I don't know why this thing is so special, but it's not. We have laws, we need to just enforce them. I don't know how this got to happen, but whatever you can do to make sure it doesn't, because it's just, it's not anything, it's not going to bring anything good to the city or to this country. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
My name's Denise McClanahan. I live at 10328 County Road 3010 in Rolla. I'm right outside the city limits. I also attended the event because I wanted to pray over the children that would be there. When I found out that there were going to be drag queens, I want to read you a quote from one of the first well-known drag queens, Harris Kornstein and Harper Keenan. They wrote a book called Drag Pedagogy and the Playful Practice of Queer Imagination in Early Childhood. And per their words, drag is a useful tool in reformulating children's relationship with sex, sexuality, and eroticism, unquote. And this is not natural for children, it is not healthy for children. And so I was told by someone in the city that the police would stop anything that happened that was lewd, but their definition of lewd was a very, very low standard. It was unacceptable. What they were told, it's not their fault, it's what they were told from somebody. And so I was just horrified to see all of those children exposed to what they were exposed to, and also made, they were enjoying it. They were feeling comfortable around these men who were dressed inappropriately, and that also is a step in the wrong direction for these children. And there was a flag up that somebody in the audience who knows more about all the flags told me was called a minor attracted persons, and I looked it up, and it said that online it wasn't there. Was not?
No, it was not.
Okay, good, good. All right, thank you for clarifying that, though I won't say what it says then. I'm glad it was not there. And so, that's it. I think everything else was covered, but I thank you for thinking about this. I think that you can do something, and we hope that, we can help in some way, because this has to stop. This can only get worse if it doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Denise.
Thank you. Back
John
again.
Thompson, pastor of Life Church. I live at 41 Laird, Rolla, Missouri. I have several businesses in town and other kind of stuff. So everybody's done a really great job, I believe, on what they're saying. I don't know how long everybody's been in Rolla. When I was a little guy here, it was pretty rowdy. And the college was pretty much out of control on a lot of stuff. And there was things that was put into place. Alice is no longer a part of the St. Patrick's Day thing. The reason being is people was getting hurt. They put restrictions on the guys painting the street uptown because it was getting out of control and they was damaging the businesses on Pine Street. And when we had the amateur UFC fights here, there was people there to make sure that there wasn't anybody under the age of 18 that was attending these deals, and on and on and on. And I think that's the big deal from my brother here that is even totally opposite of me, but the thing's all the same, no matter what. There's things that adults get to choose to do, and there's things that we shouldn't have to make our children choose to do. Like my other brother was saying about his horrible life that he had to live. I also was forced to be sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused, taken advantage of in all kinds of ways by men and women in this town when I was growing up. And there was nobody there to protect me because the way that it was covered up and the shame that was associated with it. But finally, somebody stood up for me, and it changed my life. I moved back here 16 years ago to better the projects that we're talking about. I lived in the worst areas that we had here in town. Highest crime, highest drug, biggest poverty area. I own several properties over there, and Mr. Steve Flowers and other people in here can attest that I've made mine really nice because I'm changing the town in a good way. Instead of just saying, man, that was bad that happened to me, I decided to leave everything that I was successful in to come back and do something good where maybe I was abused and nobody stuck up for me. I volunteer to coach the little kids in this town, and I take them over to where I used to live. And then I take them to my home now, which is modest, but it's a mansion compared to where I lived as a child. And so the deal is, man, let's take care of them, right? Nobody was there for me. but I'm definitely going to be there for anybody else. And once again, it's not about anything except for there's some things that are appropriate. I'm not going to take my grandbabies and belly them up to the bar and get them some shots. You know, so let's just do what's right. I don't know what we can do, but I do know we can do something. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
My name is John Strebe, 700 North Hickory Street, Salem, Missouri. Number one, I was kind of disappointed that my son's performance at Pride as a drag queen didn't make the cut for you all to see. To be honest with you. My son started performing drag at the age of 14. He went to places that were appropriate for him. In his career of drag, which he is of age now, I have missed one performance, and that was due to COVID. I go to all of his performances. There was no pornography at the event this past weekend, or excuse me, when it was. There's no pornography. There were police officers standing there physically watching the show. Had there been something outrageously inappropriate, they would have taken action. I'm a 20-year veteran from the police department in Baltimore. I retired out of the SWAT team there. My wife had 8 years there. She is a current deputy sheriff down in Dent County, working on her 18th year. We are not scum that walk around the streets. My son is not evil. He's not demented. He's a performer. He enjoys that. He is a gay male. He is not transgender. So many people are not educated and they automatically think a drag queen, they're trans. They want to be a woman. No, it's a performance. There's been drag queens forever. A lot of movies with them. There were proper channels for the organizers of that Pride event that they had to go through. I imagine getting permits and everything else. Everything was done through the proper channels. Take into consideration weighing the two. St. Patrick's Day, nobody has a hard time with that. They have St. Patrick's Day parade. They have pub walks, or excuse me, pub crawls. There are arrests for drunk and disorderly. There are fights where there's arrests made. Verify with the chief, there is no arrest made whatsoever at Pride. There were no nudity. There was no pornography. The one statement, me as a father of a gay child, I did not agree with the one statement as far as the Betty and come to my basement. What that person actually alluded to is all the straight parents that turn their kids away, that turn their backs on their own kids. This person was saying, I'd be there for you. I took a child in for 2 years because on Christmas night when his father found out he was gay, he grabbed him by the throat and threw him out the door in front of the family, which also happened to be that young man's 17th birthday. And I wholeheartedly believe that had we not taken him in, he may have been one of those statistics on the LGBTQ suicide. I watched the pastor's sermons on TV. There were a couple misleading things, which I'm not here to argue that. I just, if you take pride away, or even any part of pride, you're telling them it's not okay. Your way of life is not okay. Researching through Newport Academy, which is the nation's leading teen treatment center for mental illness, 46% of LGBT teens versus 22% of all other teens attempt suicide. 18% actually attempted suicide within the last year. That's double the national average for all teens in the U.S. My son, once we moved here to Salem, endured the most abuse from everyone. If you live in Salem, and if you don't wear Carhartt and flannel shirts, you get picked on. And putting a stop to this, or even, the big regulations towards it, that's just, again, a door slamming in these kids' faces saying, you don't belong. You don't deserve to be where we are. Yes, sir.
No, I said one more minute.
Okay. I served on the school board in Salem for 8 years. I ran their PTA for 9, even after my kids were gone. I'm very involved with children as far as helping them with their growth, with everything. I don't see this, putting an end to this or anything, as being good for the LGBTQ community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's Heather what? Hagan.
Hi, I'll keep this short. Everybody's come up and they talked about how awful Pride was. I was there. I am a proud parent of a non-binary child. I am a CASA volunteer. I'm sure all of you know, but for those that don't, it is a court-appointed special advocate. I take on, I specialize. I just take on kids that are in the LGBTQ plus community. I'd like to say that there's not a huge need for that, but there is. So I got special permission to take my kiddo to the Pride event. And he told me after the Pride event that that is the only time in his whole time in care, he's been in care for 2 years, that is the only time that he felt loved and accepted and welcomed and like he could be himself. That was devastating to me. He has lawyers. He has a case manager. He has a guardian ad litem. He has a team of people that are in his court and supposed to be advocating for him. And that, in that event, is the only time he felt loved, welcomed, accepted for who he was. So that's pretty sad. And if that, to stop an event like that would be devastating to the youth. I think that we need more events like that, not less. Thank you.
Ma'am, what was your name again? I'm sorry. I didn't
Heather.
get- Heather, okay. Thank you.
Scott Weston. 18205, Highway 72 in Rolla.
I really could be
anonymous because what I want to say is not an opinion. What I'm going to say comes from the Word of God. Happen to have a copy right here. There's been a lot of people that have not kept their word with me. I'll pay you on Friday, man. Me and you, brother. They didn't pay me. They didn't keep their word. I'll meet you Tuesday at 3 o'clock. They didn't keep their word. I still haven't seen them. But this right here, God always keeps his word. The Tower of Babel, God kept his word. It broke his heart for
Sir,
what he had to do.
If you can, just direct your comments to this council.
Okay. It broke his heart for what he had to do at the Tower of Babel. But he ruined their little construction project. But God kept his word. The flood of Noah. You know it broke God's heart to kill all the killing that he had to do there where all the people died and the animals died. It broke his heart, but you know what God did? He kept his word. God will always keep his word. I've been serving him for 30 years. He's always kept his word. It hurts sometimes. God cannot lie. He will always keep his word. Where am I going with this? Whoa, one more example. Sodom and Gomorrah. Due to sexual deviance, God had to keep his word. I'm sure it broke his heart, again, to see such death and destruction. But God will always keep his word. If he says he's going to pay you on Friday, he'll pay you on Friday. Right? He'll always keep his word. Now let me move on. LGBTQ. What's that? Okay, oh, glad you asked. L, lesbian. What's that? That's what I understand that it is. I don't know a whole lot about it. Okay, so that's two females. Okay, so a female has a vagina and two breasts, and they're going to make love, right? What's the G? That's gay. I'm thinking that's the guys. You know, the guy has a penis and a set of gonads, and they're going to make love. Are you getting embarrassed? Is this offensive to you? What about our kids? I could go on. I think I'm going to stop on that because it's embarrassing me. Do we really want to teach our kids this kind of garbage? If you have a child that's LBGB, whatever, you should have taught them God's word. You know what else God's word says? This is the good part. God's word says that he loves you and the people behind me, whatever walk you're with. If you're a Christian, God loves you. If you're LGBTQ or any of the other, I don't understand it all, but I do know that God loves you. You know why? Because it says so in his word. God gives you his word. I love you.
Sir, another minute.
Another part of God's word, he says, I loved you so much that I sent my son. And I hear people here tonight talking about their daughter and their son. You love those kids. God loved his kids. But God knew that many souls are going to hell for all kinds of various reasons. Because he's going to keep his word. He's going to keep his word. He kept his word at the Tower of Babel. He kept his word to Noah and the flood. He kept his word in Sodom and Gomorrah. He will keep his word in Rolla. Some people may think, oh, you're judgmental. God's word tells me to be judgmental. You don't think so? Read it. If you don't have good judgment, you're going down. But God's word says that he loves you. God's word said he has provided a way that you can repent of your sins
and give your life to Jesus and avoid the devil's hell. God's promise.
Sir,
God will always keep his
Can you
word.
wrap it up? Thank you.
So tonight, if there's anybody here that wants to give their life to Jesus and be saved and avoid the devil's hell, you can do that. Just reach out to Jesus and ask him to forgive you. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Kimball. I live at 601 Southview Drive, right next to Veterans Memorial Park. And among other things, I'm the treasurer of LGBTQ Rolla. I hadn't intended to speak to this body. I appreciate John and Heather speaking in defense of what our organization is trying to do. I just wanted to address two little things. First of all, the gentleman who spoke right before me, whose name I didn't catch, he and I have a different understanding of theology. I am happy to discuss on a personal level our theological differences, but this is neither the time nor the place for a theological discussion. The second thing I wanted to say is, as other people pointed out, there were police officers at our Pride event. If there was anything beyond the pale, I feel confident they would have taken some action. And finally, I would say that I personally did not see anything at Pride that I would not have seen on primetime network television. So if you have a problem with having an all-ages event like Pride, I suggest you also ask all the networks to take all their programming off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, Lance Langenberg. I pastor First Assembly of God, 1608 North Oak Street. I just wanted to kind of lay everything out here because what I see as a leader myself, and I understand the weight of the decisions that you guys have to make. And I know a lot of you are friends of mine, and I know that a lot of the decisions you have to make, you carry a lot of weight home with you, and there's things that keep you up at night, and the things that you do affect hundreds, and for you, thousands of people. For me, it's hundreds. And I know how difficult that is. But what you as leaders have to understand is what you allow to happen, your name is on. So if you look at what you just saw in those videos, and you can put your name on that, you're responsible for it. So everything that happens in this community, everything that happens in Rolla, you are responsible for. You are. Your name is on that. So you have to think long and hard about what you allow to happen. It's not just decisions you make, it's the things you allow. We are responsible for those things as leaders. And so I would agree this is more of a leadership conversation than it is a theological conversation. I would look more at the theological side, but for you as our civic leaders, your name is on this. And I hope you think about that long and hard. And I pray for each one of you, and I appreciate everything you do for our city. I love Rolla. I love being here, and I will continue to pray for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Lance.
Patrick Wilson, 209 Cedar Lane. I'll be brief, but that's not my expertise. I am a pastor here in this community. I was at Pride representing the Trevor Project. Every Thursday night, while most of you are asleep, I am not. I am on a crisis management hotline talking to LGBTQ students, young adults who are on the brink of killing themselves. My job as a volunteer with the Trevor Project is to try to talk them out of that. Much of what I've heard tonight is what leads them down the path to want to end their life. I would ask you to raise a voice for those who are on the brink of life and death, and to recognize that all life matters regardless of sexual orientation. As a pastor here in this community, I want to provide a safe place for all to be able to come and worship regardless of their preferences. And I know that may be a minority view, but I think that it's necessary for us to be a place where everyone can have the freedom to believe what they want to believe, live their life how they want to live it, and to do so in the safety and confines of this great community. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Good evening, Karen Harris, Rolla, Missouri. I was actually listening to City Council this evening at home while I was cleaning, and I heard Chris from Gays Against Groomers and the young man from St. Louis that was raised in Pruitt-Igoe speak, and I heard some of the other testimonies, and I felt compelled to come down and offer my 2 cents worth. So here it is. So really, I do have a statement, but I have a question, and the question is, why? No one is asking that question. Why? We have had a Pride event in Rolla for the past 2 or 3 years. This isn't the first Pride event that we've had in this city, and to my knowledge, it's gone off without controversy. So my question is, why did they choose to bring in drag queens? What does drag have to do with Pride, with being LGBTQA+, any more than burlesque does? Drag is a performance similar to burlesque. It is, for the most part, a sexualized performance. And to the people that want to equate drag in a public taxpayer-funded venue to something you would see on TV, my answer to that would be, well, you could turn the TV off and your tax dollars aren't going to it. You don't even have to subscribe to it if you don't want to. So I really am trusting council members to address the decency issue, because truly that is the issue that's at hand. I don't believe that the Pride event is even in question. I don't think that the city council is being asked to cancel future Pride events or even to make a comment on the Pride event itself other than the drag show. And I do think that that is truly the issue at hand, and we have to stay focused on what the issue is at hand. Why are drag queens being brought into our community and asked to perform in front of children? So I would really just ask for the city council to stay focused on the task at hand. Don't let it be distracted by what people are trying to say is the overall Pride event, because I don't believe that that is the issue. The issue is, why are you bringing in sexualized performers to use public taxpayer property to perform for our children? It's a decency issue. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Council. I'm Scott McBride. I live on Grand Sur Avenue here in Rolla. Didn't know this was on the agenda until recently. Hadn't been aware of what was going on at the band shell. And I'm trying to think, as some of you know, I'm also an attorney, and I'm trying to kind of put myself in the shoes of what the council would need to look at. And I keep coming back to this idea that in the interest of protecting children, we wouldn't allow, or a city perhaps shouldn't allow, children to attend a gay club in which drag was being presented. So why are we allowing children to attend a public venue? And so that's where I'm kind of coming down on this. If this was any other venue, they would not be allowed at it. The individuals who were the police officers providing control and some sense of authority would be replaced by bouncers who would say to mom and dad, remember, your child is too young to be here. There's a reason for that. And so I'm trying to just kind of frame it in an issue or in a way that makes sense. And again, I haven't prepared these remarks. I haven't, other than this evening, been kind of confronted with what this looks like for a city to work through. I do believe you have the power to do something, as you have the power to do a lot of things on behalf of children. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. In addition to being a father, and in addition to being an attorney in town, I am a Christian. There are theological issues. I'm not sure this council is going to resolve those issues that have been wrestled with for centuries. But I do think you can protect the kids in a way that makes sense. And based on what was said before by some of the other pastors and other citizens of this community, I encourage you to take this seriously and to heart and to make those decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Anyone else? Thank you all for coming. Mayor, City Council comments. We have one on the schedule. Councilman Broman, you have something you want to present? Yes.
Where's it going?
Council, Mayor, Terrace Cates actually beat me to the punch at the beginning with the Chesterfield ordinances, but I wanted to go over a couple things. You know, I was there at the event on Saturday, June the 10th. A lot of this that I'm going to read is already in state law, but I want you guys to hear it so you can understand this is coming from some federal cases. And I've got the link down at the bottom. I can get you guys that information. Pornography, Merriam-Webster, the depiction of erotic behavior, as in pictures or writing, intended to cause sexual excitement. Number 2, material such as books or a photograph that depicts erotic behavior and is intended to cause sexual excitement. Number 3, the depiction of acts in a sensational manner so as to arouse a quick, intense emotional reaction. So most pornography is not legally obscene, i.e. most pornography is protected by the First Amendment. To be obscene, pornography must, at a minimum, depict or describe patently offensive, hardcore sexual conduct. The Supreme Court has created a 3-part test known as the Miller test to determine whether a work is obscene. And that's kind of what's in our state statutes right now, and that's where Chesterfield kind of got their ordinances from. The Miller test asks this: A, whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work, taken as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest. B, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law. And C, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And that last part's interesting. A reasonable person is a phrase used to denote a hypothetical person who exercises qualities of attention, knowledge, intelligence, and judgment that society requires of its members for the protection of their own interests and the interests of others. Thus, the test of negligence is based on either a failure to do something that a reasonable person, guided by considerations that ordinarily regulate conduct, would do, or on the doing of something that a reasonable and prudent, wise person would not do. So, when a federal statute refers to obscenity, it should be understood to refer only to pornography that is obscene under the Miller Standard, as application of the statute to other material would ordinarily be unconstitutional. However, narrowly drawn statutes that serve a compelling interest, such as protecting minors, may be permissible even if they restrict pornography that is not obscene under the Miller Act or under the Miller test. In Sable Communications of California versus Federal Communications Commission, the Supreme Court recognized that there is a compelling interest in protecting the physical and psychological well-being of minors. The interest extends to shielding minors from the influence of literature that is not obscene by adult standards. The government may serve this legitimate interest, but to withstand constitutional scrutiny, it must do so by narrowly drawn regulations without unnecessarily interfering with the First Amendment freedoms. It is not enough to show that the government's ends are compelling. The means must be carefully tailored to achieve those ends. We already have these laws in our state. There are other cities that are using these laws as ordinances, and it comes from here. So my question tonight is to the council, do we want to pursue an ordinance to bring to the attention of the local area of where we stand on the subject of obscene and pornographic material in public places? That's all I got.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Before I talk to council, since several people mentioned our police officers, Chief, do you feel that, at least when I was there, I think there was 3, but do you think our police officers were mindful of state statutes when they were there?
Two of my officers and myself were there. Our main job while we were there was to protect the public. We had never had an event like this in Rolla before, and we didn't know if we were going to have problems with protesters or if we were going to have problems with the people themselves there. We didn't have any problems. There were no fights. There was one protester there for a little while, and there were some church organizations walking around handing out pamphlets, but no problems whatsoever. As police officers, we can't enforce our moral code, what we feel is morally right or not right. We're there for one specific job, and that is to protect the public. I did watch the shows, and although they were very offensive to some people, there was nothing illegal there. Do I think that the kids should have been there? Absolutely not. This was not a show for kids, I can tell you that, watching it. But all the kids that were there with their parents, so their parents brought them there. And that's an issue that's completely outside of this particular thing. But as police officers, we were not there to make arrest. We were there to protect the public. If we had an ordinance or something that we could have enforced, then we would have taken action. But I saw nothing there that would have violated any laws other than having the kids there, and unfortunately, there's no law against that right now. So.
Thank you, Chief.
All right.
Chief, before you go, do you think, saying to children that, if you are there alone and that they would, keep this secret and they would be willing to provide alcoholic beverages and tobacco products, is that not against the law?
I didn't hear that statement, and the 2 officers that were with me didn't hear it either. Had I heard that, that's one of these ones that could be conceived as being against the law. It could have been not. Had I heard that, I definitely would have had a talk with the person that made that remark.
Okay.
Because it was very inappropriate. But unfortunately, people can say things all they want. It's their First Amendment rights. So it was not against the law, but it was something that I would have talked to them
Right,
about.
and
had
I
heard
get
it.
First Amendment rights, but I also think about, if someone was a child predator and they were to say, something enticing to lure children, that's also luring when you're saying, like, I will provide these things that are illegal for you to obtain. I will provide them for you, and I will keep secrets. That, to me, I was just curious on where that fell.
Well,
so.
like I said, I didn't hear that. And the 2 officers I was with didn't hear it because I asked about it later when I was told that was said.
Okay.
And they didn't hear that, so had we heard it, like I said, I would have definitely had a talk
Addressed
with
it.
the person
Okay.
afterwards.
Yeah, and Megan, to your point, you know, I wasn't there. I was out of town. But when you have a show going on, somebody's putting on a performance, and I'm not at all defending, but sometimes people just say things, so we don't know the context of how that was. But I think that that actually kind of speaks to the nature, if you will, of the event, to have a comment to come out like that. So I think that that's important. And to the point of a First Amendment right, I mean, you cannot yell fire in a movie
Correct.
house.
Mhm. There are
So
times
I think
when the
there's
First Amendment
restrictions
does not.
to good morality. So there's not restrictions to good morality. There's restrictions of what you can do against that.
Well, and Chief, one of the things that comes to mind is, like you said, the kids appeared to be there with a parent. I'm a father of 2 daughters. I like to have the freedom to make decisions to raise my children as I see fit, and I appreciate, even though I may disagree with many of them, there's a freedom that parents have. However, being in a public arena, we don't know if all the children there were there with their parents either. It is a public area. You could have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old out there riding their bicycle, and so to have people approaching them, pulling their shirt down to have money stuffed into it and things like that, that's where it becomes more concerning to me. I want to be respectful of people to have freedoms and rights to raise their children, even if I don't personally agree with it. But when you put it into a public arena, there has to be a scrutiny because there could be children not with their parents down there.
That's a good point.
Thanks, Chief.
You know, I want to apologize to the young lady that I interrupted. And first of all, I want to say something. You're asking a police officer, if you look at today's news and you watch what happens to them,
Yeah.
if they speak out against anything, or they go against anything that someone decides as a special interest group is going to come after them, those individuals will lose their job. I ask, where were the parents at this event? Why are parents allowing this? Why are you letting children have a phone in their house untethered? I work with children all day long. I love children. It's what I do. And it upsets me that we think that this is the one and only place where it happens. But children talk to me all the time about the things that they see in their lives. We have to, as a nation, stand up and make men and women accountable to raising their families. It's not the city council's job to raise your children. We can legislate, we can put everything on the books, but the truth of the matter is moms and dads need to step up and do what they think is right for their children. I'm tired of being, it bothers me to no end that I'm being lumped in as an educator, and I know you didn't do it, but it happens that we're going to do this in school, and it's not happening in our schools. So take a deep breath, folks. There are a lot of us up here that there was a lot of trepidation, I'll personally, about voting yes for this whenever the event occurred. But I wore the uniform. I believe that the First Amendment is an important part of our nation, and freedom of speech is paramount. So for me, I had to vote yes for this. I didn't know what it would entail. It upsets me to see that, to see those kids. I know some of those kids. I'll work with them. I'm sorry.
Man, I want to make a correction. We did not vote yes on this
Thank you,
event.
Rob.
This was not
We
city council.
voted yes to allow them to use.
allow
Food trucks.
cars to
Food trucks to come in
allow a
and close
truck
the
to come
street.
into a parking lot.
No, you did.
Okay.
We
Well,
did
I'm
not
sorry.
do that.
I'm just
And
so frustrated.
Also, I want to say something, that I appreciate every single person that came out here in support. And I appreciate, I had it written down over here, John and Heather, for your points. They were very heartfelt. John, you're from Salem, is that your first name? Yes, sir. Okay, so and I get your point. I really do understand your point. But I want to say I appreciate everybody coming up and standing up and saying something.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about it, just like even in the agenda right here, the agenda, when there's citizens' communication that's written down, it's always very specific. Like, Rob wants to come in and talk about, he's unhappy about the lawns in this neighborhood, or whatever. We're very specific about our descriptions about what we're getting ready to talk about. Now, I'm not blaming anybody at the city, but even in our agenda, it says Terry Cates regarding recent events of the band shell. Like there's a trepidation, I think, anywhere of saying anything that's going to be against this, and I think there's a lot of misinterpretations about loving people and all the things that this stands for. So I really applaud you guys for coming out and having the courage to make your voice known. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I was just gonna follow up on Matt's statement and to clarify a little bit. It was the covered area right next to City Council's parking lot that we allowed. So it was just the covered area that we had allowed for food trucks to go there. We did not, City Council did not approve this event. This was something that was done through administration. It was approved through that avenue. So that's just something I want everyone to understand.
So given that, I would like to make a motion that we investigate putting together an ordinance about making restrictions for minors at drag shows.
I would second that motion.
I anticipate that council wants to talk about this in greater detail. So we'll certainly vote on the motion. But I think, this is a very complex subject. It's being challenged around the country every day of the week. And I think there's a lot of parts that have been raised tonight. So council probably, as time goes on, should probably focus on some very specific components of that as opposed to a broad brush. Clearly, there seems to be some consensus regarding children and exposure to children, so you might want to start with that as well. So our intent was to bring it back, put it on the next council agenda as a discussion item, with really at that point getting council to say, okay, where do you want to tackle this? What parts do you want to tackle? So whether you do that via the motion or we were going to do that anyway, it's your call. So
I think we'll do
give
it
some
the
thought to
official
that.
way.
Well, I would, yeah, I
There's a
want to
motion
go
and
through
a
the
second,
motion.
So restate the motion.
I make a motion that we restrict minors' attendance at drag shows.
Let me just,
Okay, that's different.
all right, hold on.
Well, hey,
Yeah, hold on.
help me out.
You're effectively writing an ordinance right there that might not pass. So,
His original motion was to have a discussion and investigate what we can.
Yep. Josh's last statement on his paper,
Yes.
I think states, and he asked that question, and that's where I think we should go with that. What I want to ask tonight is, does council want to look into and pursue an ordinance to bring to the attention of the local area of where we stand on the subject of obscene material in public places?
I'll take that
For
motion.
children, and Rob took the
What she
motion
said.
second, and
Hold on. You got a motion on the table, so you can't,
No,
We're trying to word it right.
No,
is that
you
your
asked
motion?
me to restate the motion.
Yes.
She said it better than I said it.
Josh said it.
yeah, so
Fine,
that's
that
your
was my
motion.
original
Somebody over here
intent.
second your original motion.
Yeah, that was my original
You
motion.
have to withdraw.
That was the intent
You
right
have to
there.
withdraw that motion, because somebody
Well,
else.
he can say that's his motion, because he was trying to re-articulate what his motion was. Are you saying that's what your motion was?
That's what the intent of the motion, yes.
Somewhere over here, there was a second. Was that
Yes.
what the second was for?
yes, that's what it was.
Now you got a motion. Go
All right, thank you, Lance.
Thank you for the civics.
Lori, do you need?
Lori, would you repeat the motion?
She said no.
He's got it.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
A motion to look into and pursue an ordinance to bring to the attention of the local area of where to stand on the subject of obscene material in public places.
That was very, very well said, wasn't it, Rob?
Good job, Rob.
Good job, Rob.
That's why you got the
Okay,
second.
there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion or clarification? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. council comments, other than this subject?
Yeah, just want to remind everybody that the Rolla Lions Club has the 88th annual carnival. It's going to be running June the 30th through July the 3rd. Please go out and be supportive of that. They do an outstanding job. They do wonderful things in our community, so let's go out there and be supportive of them and have a good time.
Councilman Lister, I need help in the food shack this year.
Is that a comment for?
You beat me to it. You beat me to it. I was going to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I know this is an important subject to everyone. Thank you for taking the time to come out and express your opinions.
The only thing was maybe to make publicly that there's no meeting on the 3rd.
That'd be a good
That's
idea.
right.
The next
thank you.
council meeting is
Thank
on the 17th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, just so everyone publicly knows that.
If I can, it's not a council comment, but just for the good of the order, the city is having an open house. Shoot, Floyd, I didn't write that date down.
The 13th at 4 p.m. at
That's it.
Eugene Hall?
Yes,
Yeah.
July 13th, from 4 to 6 p.m. It's a chance for the public to give input on parks, public work activities, and join us.
Yeah, I'd like to mention also, we have a Vietnam-era pinning ceremony on June 27th at 9 a.m. at Columbia College to honor all Vietnam vets in the Vietnam era.
Can't hear anything. I'm sorry.
Yeah, hold on. Kevin, I talked to a couple of people, including myself. What does pinning mean?
They're gonna get recognized, they're gonna get honored, and they're gonna get pinned from the state of Missouri and from AUSA and Phelps to the Fort.
Hold on, excuse me.
We're still in open session,
Yep.
please.
We have open session, folks.
Thank you.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Let's get a teacher's voice.
No, it's a Marine.
Kevin, would you restate the one, because that's a special event? Would you restate the Vietnam?
Yeah, so we've got a Vietnam-era pinning ceremony on 27 June at 9 a.m. at Columbia College. It is to honor and recognize all the Vietnam-era veterans that we still have within our community. I'd love everybody to be there, and if you've got somebody that deserves to be honored and pinned for that event, we'd love to get a hold of the chamber. They've got a list. We've got over 80 from the community already that have already signed up to be a part of the event. So love to have you guys there.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments? Okay, meeting adjourned. You're free to hug and talk.